Now, today, we are gonna see, what if Harry Potter had private relationship with Luna Lovegood? Episode 1. Join Patreon for early access and exclusive content of Super Op stories. Also adult and steamy Harry Potter stories too. Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. Minerva was sitting in her office and halfway through with grading a rather poor attempt at an essay when the silence was disturbed by a hesitant knock on the door. "Come in," the professor called out. The door cracked open to reveal her favorite bushy-haired Gryffindor. "Can I speak with you for a moment, Professor?" Hermione asked nervously, pausing at the door, the expression on her face and her tone of voice betraying the fact that her thoughts were in turmoil. "Of course," Minerva agreed, "come in." She waited until after the girl had settled herself. "What is it that's bothering you, Ms. Granger?" "It's about Harry and Ron," Hermione began. She bit her lower lip in distress as she tried to work up the courage to ask her head of house for advice on how to repair a wounded friendship. "You're worried about their so-called duel, right?" the professor suggested with suppressed a smile. "Ron flung a curse at Harry and Harry put Ron in the hospital wing." Hermione sobbed. "What am I supposed to do? And how was she going to get them to reconcile their differences?" Fourth year had been one of the worst of her life, due both to the dangers of the tournament and the rift that had formed between Harry and Ron before the first task. "What if I can't fix this? Why don't we examine what happened?" Minerva suggested gently. "What preceded the fight?" "They were arguing about something or other," Hermione said, "I'm not sure what." "Then Mr. Weasley tried to hex Mr. Potter," Minerva prompted. "What curse did he use?" "Double vision hex," Hermione replied instantly, having spent 2 hours grilling every witness so as to have as much information as possible before she set out to write things. "And what spell did Mr. Potter reply with?" "I'm not sure, Professor," Hermione admitted, "but it caused Ron's hands and feet to grow together and would it surprise you to learn that Mr. Potter was attempting to cast a clapping hex?" "But, you didn't see the so-called fight, did you?" Minerva asked, her lips twitching a bit. "I was in the library when it happened, Professor," Hermione agreed, "but the other students told me what happened and it was horrible." "Would it surprise you to learn that Mr. Weasley immediately demanded that Mr. Potter teach him that hex?" Minerva asked. "But, the fight, Hermione sputtered. "How many similar fights have the Gryffindor boys engaged in this year?" Minerva asked dryly. "The girls tended to be a lot more subtle and private when resolving their differences." "A lot," Hermione admitted with a blush. "A lot," Minerva agreed with a smile, "most of which I turn a blind eye to." "But this one is different," Hermione protested. "Yes it is," Minerva agreed. "For one thing Mr. Weasley ended up in the hospital. For another, Mr. Potter has invented what promises to be a useful new spell." "But you assigned Harry an indefinite detention," Hermione said weakly. "Why would you do that if it wasn't serious?" "I asked Mr. Potter to meet with our charms professor after classes so that they could figure out Mr. Potter's new hex," Minerva corrected with a smile. "Mr. Weasley objected until I explained that it was not a punishment so much as a desire to replicate Mr. Potter's accidental spell, at which point Mr. Weasley repeated his request to learn it. I never thought I'd have to tell you about the dangers of putting too much stock in rumor." "Sorry, Professor," Hermione said with a blush. "I just thought, there were so many people, sorry." "Never apologize for asking questions," Minerva said. "Is there anything else, Ms. Granger? Would you like to join Mr. Potter's sessions with Professor Flitwick?" Minerva asked, knowing her student well enough to guess the unasked question. "Yes, Professor," Hermione agreed. "All right then." Minerva jotted down a quick note. "Will there be anything else?" "Just one thing, Professor," the girl agreed. "Yes, Ms. Granger," Minerva asked. Is it all right if I ask a personal question, Professor?" Hermione asked nervously. "Of course," Minerva agreed. "So long as you remember to bear in mind that being asked a question does not necessarily mean that I will be willing to answer it." The old woman smiled. "It's also a good idea to bear in mind that getting too personal could very well annoy the person you're asking." The girl paused. "Go ahead, Ms. Granger," the professor said gently. I was just wondering, the girl trailed off. Yes, the professor prompted gently. Who's the uniformed man in the picture on your desk? Hermione blurted. Oh, him. Minerva giggled, sounding more like one of the seventh years than a dignified professor of transfiguration. That's my husband. Your husband, Hermione said dumbly. But, the uniform. My husband was a tank commander during the Second World War, Minerva said wistfully. He looked so dashing in his uniform that I couldn't help myself. And what a chore it had been fighting off the other girls that had gotten the same thought upon getting their first look at him. I didn't know you married a muggle, Professor. The girl examined the photo, unsure how to take the news she'd just heard. Who said anything about a muggle? Minerva laughed. My husband is as pureblood as you can get without growing extra toes. But I thought, Hermione stammered. I see, Minerva sighed. While it's true that the majority of the British magical community was exempted from conscription, it's also true that the Anzac, Canadian, and American communities were not. And let me tell you that certainly caused some friction. Their lads called ours cowards and our lads called theirs idiots who got involved in a muggle war. My husband came here with the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps, and to this day he refuses to set foot on any of the home islands due to what happened during the war. But, yes, I know if he were to visit me here he would be in Scotland, not England. Minerva agreed with a sniff of disdain at what she saw as the man's willful ignorance. Unfortunately, my husband refuses to make such distinctions, Minerva sighed. Despite all that, some purebloods enlisted anyway, exempted or not, and some of them performed very well at that. Be sure to ask Mr. Longbottom about his maternal grandfather sometime. The vast majority of the English magical community sat back and did nothing while London burned. Makes you wonder just who they think they owe allegiance to, if not Queen and country. I worry sometimes. She trailed off as old memories came to fore. I didn't know any of this, Professor, Hermione confessed. That's because it's a recent and shameful enough chapter in our history that most of those in power would like to pretend that nothing happened, Minerva said with pursed lips. Will that be all, Ms. Granger? Yes, Professor. Good. Now, you will have to excuse me. My husband is expecting me home and I hate to keep him waiting. What? But I thought you said your husband wouldn't set foot here, Professor. He's not. Magic makes a daily commute from Alberta a bit easier than it would otherwise be. You'd be surprised at how adaptable humans can be, Minerva laughed. We even found a way to make the time difference work for us. The old woman chuckled to herself as the young girl skipped out of her office. Ah, to be young again. She returned home and resumed her normal routine for the next 2 weeks until a note from her favorite student arrived with a request for another meeting. You wished to speak with me again, Ms. Granger? Minerva asked. I need your permission to leave school grounds, Professor, Hermione stated in an even voice. It was adorable the way the portray herself as a mature adult. All right. Why do you wish to leave school grounds, Ms. Granger? Minerva asked curiously. I want to buy Harry a new watch, Professor, Hermione explained. His old one broke in the Treeweza Road's second task and he's been without one ever since. What prompted this decision? Minerva was curious to find out what was going through the young girl's mind and wondering if her relationship with her best friend might not be drifting into romantic territory. Might be time to set up another staff pool. Christmas is coming up, Professor, Hermione said quickly, refusing to meet the woman's eye. In a couple months, Minerva allowed. And she could feel the hint of something intriguing hanging just out of reach. And Harry needs a new watch, Hermione said firmly, trying to bury further inquiry in the subject. So I've decided to get him one since he apparently won't get one for himself. All right, Minerva agreed. If the girl didn't want to talk, so be it. Change into muggle cloth. And meet me back here in 20 minutes. I'll need to visit my parents to get some money to pay for it first, Professor, Hermione added. That can be arranged, Minerva said with a smile. Thank you, Professor, Hermione said as she rushed out of the office. The young girl returned a few minutes later wearing a rather conservative outfit with matching sensible shoes. Come with me, Ms. Granger, Minerva ordered. Yes, Professor, Hermione agreed, falling into step behind her head of house. They came to a halt just outside the ward line and Minerva offered her hand to the young witch. Now then, Minerva said. Hold tight and I will apparate us to your parents' house. They're at number 12 St. James Square, Hermione interjected. They moved. Minerva asked. Your school records still list your address as being in the village of Matchingham. Matchingham Hall is just the weekend and summer house, Professor, Hermione explained. The London house is at St. James Square. I see. Minerva resisted the urge to laugh at the thought of the sprawling Granger estate as being just anything. Shall we go then? Yes, Professor, Hermione agreed. Minerva kept her face impassive as her student led her to one of the more opulent townhouses, darted up the front steps, threw open the door, and led her professor inside. Is Mother in? Hermione asked the first servant they ran across. A maid just inside the entrance apparently scratching her lower back. No, Ms. Hermione, the maid replied. The woman turned her attention to the professor. This is your professor of charms, is it not, Ms. Hermione? No, Charlotte, it's Professor McGonagall. Transfiguration in my head of house. I see. The maid nodded. Madam Granger called for the car a few minutes ago and will be arriving shortly. All right, Hermione agreed. Could you have her meet us in the library? I can and will, Ms. Hermione, the maid agreed. Hermione passed the time by giving her favorite professor a quick tour of what was available in the house's copious reference section. Of course the magic section's a bit thin, Hermione said mournfully. Perhaps, she cut off when the door opened. Hermione, a stately brunette that Minerva knew to be Hermione's mother, greeted them. I see you've decided to visit. The woman was shadowed by a large gray-haired man with cold predatory eyes. Mother, Hermione said with a bright smile. I hope you don't mind if my driver joins our little meeting, Hermione's mother stated as she waved for them both to make themselves comfortable. I'm simply lost without him around. Not at all, Minerva agreed. Hermione's mother rang a bell as she took her seat, summoning another maid. Some refreshments, please, Susanna. Right away, ma'am. The maid returned a short time later and set the table before taking a discreet position behind Professor McGonagall. Now then, she turned to her daughter. What's this all about? I need to use some of my trust fund, Mum, Hermione said with only the barest hint of nervousness. Really? The stately woman's eyebrows raised a hair. Whatever for? I want to buy Harry a new watch, Hermione explained. It will. I'll have to be more than I usually draw for books. Father always says that you can buy quality once or junk 100 times, she added after a heartbeat. I see. A smile bloomed on the woman's face. Quote, shall I make an appointment with our jeweler? I'm sure he'd be happy to open something up for you this afternoon. That won't be necessary, Mum, Hermione said. Professor McGonagall has already been gracious enough to make arrangements for me. Excellent, the woman said with a smile. Is there any other business we need to discuss? One more thing, Minerva spoke up. I need you to sign a permission slip allowing Ms. Granger to accompany me out of the country. Canada, Minerva stated. That's where the watchmaker, my grandfather-in-law, lives. Seems like a bit of a trip, Hermione's mother said doubtfully. Magical transportation makes it a bit easier than would otherwise be the case, Minerva said with a smile. We can be there and back in just a few minutes. Of course. She signed the paper. Now if there is nothing else, would you do me the favor of giving me a few minutes alone with my daughter? Of course, Minerva agreed. Dr. Granger's stone-faced driver stood up and gently but forcefully led her out of the room. Mrs. Granger wanted me to tell you something, the man said in a gravelly voice. What is that? She would like to have another meeting with you later, the man replied. She would prefer it if Miss Granger were not aware of that meeting. Of course, Minerva agreed quickly. Please tell Mrs. Granger that I will return after Miss Granger and I have concluded our business. The driver nodded and the two of them passed the next several minutes in silence as they waited for mother and daughter to finish catching up. Finished? Minerva asked Ken. DLY when the door opened and Hermione came out. Yes, Professor, Hermione agreed. Hold on to my robes then, Minerva ordered. I didn't know that it was possible to apparate that far, Hermione said in wonder. It's not, Minerva said as she activated her portkey. My robes are the portkey, she finished on the other side. Oh, Hermione said dumbly. It's something I started doing when I had children, Minerva explained. My robes and my hair were the only things I could get them to hold on to. Getting them to let go on the other hand. Hermione filed away that bit of information and followed her professor down a small alley and into a well-kept shop. Minerva, the man said with a grin. Welcome. He turned to Hermione. And what can I do for you, young lady? I'd like to buy a watch for my friend Harry, Hermione replied. What sort of watch? The man asked. It will have to be mechanical, Hermione mused. Other than that, well, father likes Patek Philippe, or at least I think he does. The last 4 or 5 he's bought have all been Patek Philippe. Any model in particular? He asked, mentally raising the upper price limit of his recommendations. I think his current favorite. He has a perpetual calendar and a moon phase, Hermione replied weakly. I never took much interest and he's got so many of them that it's hard to keep track. Would you like to take a look at what I have on hand? The old man offered. Only the ones in platinum, Hermione declared quickly. Father says that gold is too gaudy for a man. Afraid I don't have any in platinum at the moment, the old man confessed. I do have a platinum case for a pocket watch movement though. I'll take a look at it, Hermione said with a shrug. Miss Granger, does your father really insist on platinum cases? Minerva asked, wondering if the girl knew how expensive it would be. Yes, Professor, Hermione agreed. Mum says that it's because he comes from new money. Hermione gave a impish smile. Dad's family made much of the fortune in guano in the last century and Mum says that he's a bit defensive about the whole thing, Hermione confided. Ophobe because Dad is a bit vain about jewelry and clothing. I see. The corners of her mouth twitched. Mum prefers to be a bit more sensible about things, Hermione continued. But as she's not the one we need to imper, a panicked look appeared on Hermione's face as she realized that she'd said too much. Miss Granger, Minerva sighed, I fear that at my age, the senses start to become dulled. Now what was that last bit again? But since Dad has more watches and clothes then I'm going to trust his judgment for now, Hermione squeaked. All right, Miss Granger, Minerva agreed, starting to get an idea of what was happening. Here we are, the old man announced his return. He laid a small box on the table. Take a look. Hermione peered into the box with look of intense concentration on her face. It's rather big, isn't it? Rather standard for a pocket watch. The old man replied neutrally. Where is the rest of it? Hermione held up the rest of the case. The movement, crystal, and dial need to be picked separately. Can you engrave the back? Of course, the old man agreed. I also have a matching chain for that. What kind of movement? Hermione asked quickly. I was thinking of using a customized Hamilton 992B in size 16 to match the case, the old man said calmly. That's the mechanical part of the watch. Why wouldn't you just use a Tempest charm or some other spell? Hermione shifted into knowledge collecting mode. One of the major problems with the Tempest charm is that it will not keep standard time, the old man explained. That leaves aside the fact that it's not accurate to more than 5 minutes. Precision was needed when the charm was developed and standard time wouldn't even be considered for another 4 centuries. Oh. Hermione's nose wrinkled as she processed the information. That's not to say that I didn't use any magic. The old man continued. Several of the parts have been enchanted, making it as waterproof, fireproof, shockproof, scratchproof, and generally indestructible as magic allows. That's not to say you shouldn't be careful with it, of course. Of course, Hermione echoed. But it should be able to survive any accidents. Internally, the movement is self-winding, cleaning, lubricating, etc. Rather than using tritium, the dial has illuminating charms on it that can be set so that they are only visible to the owner or some select group of people. I could go on, but it would take a while and it's all in the manual anyway. Wouldn't you get into trouble for misuse of Muggle artifacts? Hermione asked intently. Doesn't apply to Canada, the old man laughed. I was planning to take this back to the United Kingdom, Hermione pointed out. I figured that when you mentioned the statute. It's illegal to charm Muggle items, he said with a grin. Possession of charmed Muggle items is a bit of a gray area. Lets the old families get away with a lot of shady things. Even if it did apply to Canada, well, there's more than a few loopholes in that law. Overseas trade buying. Lucrative enough to encourage a very close reading of the laws in question. What? Doesn't apply to things made by members of a magical society for one, the old man replied, which covers everything that's got an enchantment. Aside from that, they only apply the statute to any tech more modern than the last war, the one my boy went to. I mean, they don't. Hermione asked in shock. A whole new world of research had just opened to her. You never wondered about the Hogwarts Express, the night bus, or the Wizard Wireless? He asked with a grin. But, there's nothing in the library. Train is run by a Canadian crew. Predominantly Canadian, I should say. Night bus has an American mechanic that makes the trip across the pond every now and again, and the Wizard Wireless has maintenance people from any number of places. Quote, we use some technology, Minerva interjected. But we, that is to say the British magical world, lack the skills to reproduce or maintain it for the most part. Most purebloods refuse to have anything to do with it and look down on anyone who has the necessary skills. That's why there are no books in the library, Hermione asked in a small voice. That's why, Minerva agreed. The board didn't think it appropriate to waste resources on something so common and frivolous. I can help you acquire some books on the subject if you like. Thank you, Professor, that would be wonderful, Hermione gushed. And, what is it, Ms. Granger? Do you think that you could take Harry out to get some new clothes? Hermione asked. It'd be best if you knew someone, Professor, but I could make an appointment with my father's tailor on Bond Street if you like. Why don't we discuss that later? Minerva suggested. All right, Professor, Hermione agreed. Minerva saw her charge safely back in the castle before heading to her meeting with the young girl's mother. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me, Professor McGonagall, Hermione's mother began. I have some concerns that I was hoping you could address. I will do my best, Mrs. Granger, Minerva said calmly. First of all, I was wondering why your school chose not to inform us of all that has happened. The woman's eyes were cold. Or about how close we came to losing our daughter. Minerva was acutely aware of the woman's driver, taking a position behind her. Wait, you weren't informed? No, the woman said flatly, her voice like a gunshot. We weren't. But the charms should have. Minerva trailed off. Did you put in any wards? We have not, the woman replied. Then, I suppose it could be due to the fact that you have two residences, Minerva said slowly, or, well, any number of things I suppose. I'm afraid we're speaking outside my area of expertise. I will have to get back to you with an answer. All right, she agreed. She gave her driver a meaningful look, causing him to take a step back and assume a more neutral position. Just like that, what matter? My husband and I are no longer confident that the administration will act in our daughter's best interests, she explained. Ms. Granger will be devastated to hear that you're pulling her out of Hogwarts, Minerva pointed out. We haven't decided to pull her out yet, the woman stated. We are strongly considering the possibility that we may have to at some future date. I would ask that you take a closer interest in her well-being. Take that as a personal request if you will. Of course, Minerva agreed. The old woman was willing to do almost anything to keep her star pupil. A question, if I may. What is it? If the school failed to notify you, then how did you find out? One of my husband's old school friends is classmate of the father of another of your students, the woman explained. Now that we have the unpleasantness out of the way, please call me Anne. Minerva, McGonagall replied automatically. Minerva, then. One thing has been bothering me, McGonagall began. I was hoping that you could enlighten me. What is it? I was wondering if you knew why Hermione suddenly became so interested in Mr. Potter's appearance. At a guess, it's because Hermione has been mentioning him so much in her letters that we extended an invitation for him to join us this winter. The woman smiled. We saw him at a distance a few years ago when we were putting Hermione on the train. My husband pronounced him Scruffy. Her smile widened. I'm sure you've noticed the fact that my daughter is prone to overthinking things. Yes, I have noticed that, Minerva said dryly. She is Kelly going to bother the poor boy about his appearance until after we meet? Anne giggled. She made a come here motion to her driver, who handed Minerva a large envelope. What's this? Minerva asked. A letter of credit from the goblins and an ebony card, Anne replied. Please use it to make young Harry presentable and for any projects Hermione decides to take on. Minerva's eyes bulged at the amount on the Gringotts note. Don't hesitate to call if you need more, Anne added cheerfully. With that out of the way, she leaned forward with an eager smile. Do you have any embarrassing stories to share about my daughter that I could persuade you to pass on? Railway time. Hermione had just settled down to breakfast when a large tawny owl landed and dumped a small brown paper-wrapped rectangular package onto her lap. Curiously, the girl tore it open and was delighted to find a basic primer on techno-magical devices. What'd Ron asked between bites. It's a book on mixing magic and simple technology. Hermione replied absently. Just a basic overview of some of the things that are possible along with a couple more detailed examples. Oh. Ron sensed that it might be time to find somewhere else to be. Did you know that the reason we don't see any wireless sets around the castle is because the wards interfere with the signal? Hermione asked with shining eyes, glancing up from her book for just a moment. Nope, Ron replied, senses confirmed. He looked at her and then looked down at his breakfast. The boy was in a quandary. If he stayed then he'd be the unwilling recipient of a lesson on whatever the girl's latest obsession was, but if he left he wouldn't get breakfast. Truly a conundrum that would have confounded any of history's greatest sages. Darn it. Think, Ron, think. His eyes lit up as he got an idea. Look at the time, Ron said quickly. He seized 2 large slabs of bread and made a sandwich out of everything within arm's reach. Later Hermione. Bye Ron, Hermione said automatically. Minerva sat in her office with a frown on her face. Now what was the name of that insane house elf that was stalking young Mr. Potter again? Started with a D, didn't it? Dinky, Drippy, Doodle, Dobby, Minerva ventured. Dobby is here and you is calling Dobby, Ms. Professor Kitty. The deranged house elf said eagerly. I need you to get me Mr. Potter's measurements, Minerva began. Dobby already has them, the house elf said in excitement. Dobby likes to remeasure Mr. Harry Potter Sir every night while Dobby is watching Mr. Harry Potter Sir sleep. In another part of the castle. Harry felt a chill go up his spine. Excellent, Minerva said dully. Perhaps it would be best to just pretend she hadn't heard that last bit. Now if you wouldn't mind sharing them with me. Dobby is happy to help the great Harry Potter Sir's Ms. Professor Kitty, the house elf agreed. Minerva looked at the paper. 14 centimeters. Yes, Professor Kitty. That's an invasion of Mr. Potter's privacy. Stop measuring that. The elf looked downcast. Yes, Professor Kitty. Hermione looked up from her book in concern as Harry shivered again, knowing his luck. Hermione was half convinced that the poor boy had contracted some rare tropical disease. Are you feeling all right, Harry? Hermione asked in concern. I'm just a bit tired. I'll be fine, Harry assured her. We've got history first. I'll use that time to catch up on my sleep. Concern warred with outrage to see who would get to make the response. All right, Harry. It wasn't like she was in a position to throw too many stones since she had already decided to read her new book during the lesson. Welcome home, Philip, her mother said happily. The staff tells me that Hermione decided to drop by, he said by way of greeting. Shame he hadn't been able to see her while she was in. She wanted to make a withdrawal from her trust fund, Anne explained. Whatever for? To purchase a new watch for her friend Harry. The woman said with a grin. It seems that she's gotten the idea that you won't like him if he isn't a sharp dresser. Where did she get a silly idea like that? You said he was scruffy once. Anne replied. Apparently, that's enough to get her obsessing about the matter. I told her that I would be delighted to meet the boy, he protested. I also told her that his economic status didn't bother me in the slightest. Knowing his daughter, it was unlikely in the extreme that the boy had any idea how wealthy they were. He supposed that was one way of keeping the gold diggers away. You did, she agreed. Hermione ignored everything you said. Of course, his wife said with a shrug. I gave her Professor enough so that the boy's wardrobe will match even your exacting standards. Just because I like to look my best doesn't mean that you're musically inclined, as they say, she giggled. Even though my sisters, your former sister-in-law, and several of my friends all still think that you are. Fashion is one thing that I refuse to argue with you, he sniffed, Philistine. Dandy, she growled, a fire lighting in her eyes. Uncultured harridan, he sneered leaning towards her. Do you think the boy would like to go riding? He asked suddenly. What? She asked dully. Of brooms, she pointed out, not horses. Still, he might like some variety. True, she agreed, it couldn't hurt. Might be a good idea to get him some lessons first, ease into things. Minerva was unsurprised to find Hermione waiting outside the Transfiguration classroom after the last class for the day. What can I do for you, Ms. Granger? Minerva asked with a fond smile. Professor, may I mean, do you think it would be possible if Yes, Hermione. May I go down to the tracks and inspect the Hogwarts Express? Hermione blurted out. There were several fascinating references to it in a book I've recently acquired, and I would like to see the engine for myself to get a better understanding of the text. There's no rule against it, Minerva replied. You may wish to speak with Ms. Lovegood before planning any trips. Why is that, Professor? I believe that she enjoys watching them perform maintenance, Minerva said. It therefore stands to reason that she would know more about how to go about it than I would. There may be some safety rule of which I am unaware, for example. Quote, Thank you, Professor, Hermione said in excitement before bolting down the hall to find her odd friend. Luna was engaged in a staring contest with one of the portraits when Hermione found her. As it was one of the few non-magical portraits in the castle, there was no telling how long the girl had been at it. Luna, Hermione said hesitantly. Luna broke eye contact. Oh darn. What is it? Hermione. Hermione paused. Had she imagined it, or had a look of triumph flashed over the portrait's face for a split second after her friend had blinked? Shaking the matter off as a figment of her imagination, Hermione continued. As I was saying, I was hoping that you would be willing to introduce me to the crew of the Hogwarts Express, Hermione said quickly. Professor McGonagall said you liked to watch them maintain the train. Of course, Hermione, Luna said in delight. Come on. She grabbed the older girl by the hand and began leading her forcefully out of the castle. Right now, Hermione asked weakly. I'm sure they're doing something interesting at the moment, Luna agreed. They usually are. You like trains a lot then. They're so fascinating, Luna babbled as the two girls walked down to the engine shed that held the Hogwarts Express when it was not in use. I'm fairly sure that Minister Fudge is planning to use his imprison Ed. It was at this point that Hermione tuned Luna out. Why, look who's come to visit again, boys, a man in grease-stained overalls called out. How are you doing today, Ms. Lovegood? Very well, thank you, Luna said politely. I see you've brought a friend. I have, Luna agreed airily. This is Hermione. She's a year ahead of me at Hogwarts. Pleasure to meet you, Hermione, the man said kindly. There are some donuts in the break room. Why don't you go get one for yourself and another for your friend? He suggested to Luna. I normally wouldn't, Luna said with a dreamy smile, but the Humdingers here should keep the Rotfangs away. Wonderful, he said with a smile. The large man waited until Luna was out of earshot before turning to Hermione. Can I speak? Wee man in the grease-stained overalls asked Hermione. Of course, Hermione agreed. What is it? That girl you came in with, he began. We're not sure why she likes to come here. All right, Hermione agreed, unsure of where the conversation was heading. It could be that she grew up around a mechanical printing press and sees our shop as a little bit of home thanks to the similar sights, sounds, and smells, the burly engineer said thoughtfully. Could also be because we don't put up with the sort of behavior that the staff at the castle finds acceptable. His voice hardened. I trust you understand. Luna really is my friend, Hermione protested. We might argue sometimes, but what friends don't? The man agreed, all smiles and good cheer again. Good to see she has some friend her own age. Hermione gave a shy nod, unsure of how to take that bit of wisdom. Hermione is interested in the engines, Luna announced as she burst back into the room. The girl was holding a half-eaten donut in one hand and an untouched donut in the other. You are, he asked. She is, Luna confirmed as she handed the other girl her share of the pastry haul. Well, we've got two clan class engines that don't get a whole lot of work. He waved to his left. But what people tend to think of as the Hogwarts Express is one of our Black Fives. That's a LMS Stanier Class 5460 locomotive. What do you mean one of? Hermione asked. Never put all your eggs in one basket, he advised, There's also the fact that we'd never be able to haul all the cargo we do with just one engine. He laughed. Our passenger service isn't all we do you. No. Also bring in just about everything the castle needs to stay running. He turned and began walking to the closest locomotive. This way. He led the girls to one of the engines. This particular one was built in 1936 by Armstrong Whitworth. It's 63 feet, 7 3/4 inches long. Weighs 73 long tons. Uses a Walschaerts valve gear as opposed to a Stevenson valve gear. Anything else you'd like to know? I'd like to know what all of that means, Hermione said, eyes shining with excitement. You're welcome to poke through our library if you like, he said with a shrug. A grin appeared when he noticed the girl's reaction. And to ask as many questions as you like. Thank you, Hermione said with sparkling eyes. The thought of being granted access to a previously unknown source of reading material being almost too much for the girl. Would it be possible to go on a trip with you sometime? Luna asked. That'd be up to your professor, he said easily. Before you go asking her, I'd like to caution you that it's a filthy job and that you'll be pitch black and covered in soot by the end of the day if you come along. Flitwick stared down at his fused hands with a look of joy on his face. It had taken quite a bit of effort, but they'd finally managed to replicate the boy's accident. Wonderful, Harry, the diminutive charms professor shouted. Absolutely brilliant. I did it, Harry mumbled in shock. Indeed you did, the professor agreed. Do you think you could do it again? I'm pretty sure I could, Harry agreed. Excellent. The professor looked down at his hands. Do you think you could undo it? Maybe, Harry said uncertainly. Well, I dare say that Poppy will be able to undo faster now that she's done it once before. So give it a shot. What's the worst that could happen? The engineer watched as the two girls examined every visible part of the locomotive. It did his heart good to see. A couple of the Brits take an interest in their heritage, and it would be nice to think that they might someday be able to do their own maintenance. Fat chance of that, he muttered to himself. Either the girls would lose interest or they'd emigrate to one of the more tolerant nations. The United Kingdom had a bigger problem than their homegrown terrorists. Their best and their brightest grew up into a society that stifled innovation, that smothered any attempt to change the world for the better. Was it any wonder that so many had chosen to go on to greener pastures? Phileas wilted under the healer's glare. It seemed the school nurse was much less enthused about young Mr. Potter's feat of magic than he was. Mr. Potter was successful, he ventured. So it seems, Poppy agreed flatly. Regrow missing bones. Do tell. You could cut glass with her voice. Something tells me that you're not too pleased with what happened, Phileas observed, his voice raising an octave. Why ever would you think that I was displeased with the fact that you were acting as a test dummy for spell experimentation? She asked sweetly. Or that you chose to have Mr. Potter attempt to counter-curse, rather then coming straight to the hospital wing to have things dealt with by professionals. Phileas considered the best way to answer the woman. It was a tricky situation, one wrong word and he'd anger the school's healer and set himself up for untold amounts of future pain and discomfort. It was all Albus's idea, he squealed, throwing the headmaster under the bus. Best give the woman another target for her ire. I didn't want to do it. But he made me. The half-Gobeline paused to consider something. Wouldn't hurt and it might score a few points. Harry didn't want to do it either, but Albus made us both. He's a very, very bad man. All right, she agreed. What? He asked in shock. All right, she repeated herself. I suppose I can accept that explanation. Good. But, yes, he asked weakly, preparing himself for the worst. I think it's likely that Albus might try these sorts of shenanigans again in the future, she stated calmly. I think it would be best for Mr. Potter to spend a few nights a week in the hospital wing learning about emergency healing. It'll also give you a chance to work on that new medical charm with him, he observed. It will, won't it? Poppy agreed with mock innocence. Why? I hadn't even considered that. Excellent catch, Phileas. I see. Wasn't like he owed the kid anything, or at least not enough to go against the school nurse. Deal. Pleasure doing business with you, Phileas. Likewise, Poppy. Meanwhile, Hermione and Luna had submerged themselves in the shop's small library of technical manuals and trade publications. Did you know that American locomotives are too large for British tracks? Hermione asked. I did not, Luna replied. Did you know that there were several unsuccessful attempts to use salamanders as heat generators in the firebox? Pass me that one when you're done with it, Hermione requested excitedly. Of course Hermione, Luna happily agreed, thinking how nice it was, so nice to finally have a friend who shared a common interest with her. Harry and Professor Flitwick squared off in the latter's classroom. After a bow, both men drew their wands with a flourish. Ready, Harry? Flitwick asked. I think so, sir, Harry agreed. Okay, the old man said with a grin. On 3. 1, 2, 3. The old man cast a spell at Harry and blocked the boy's own spell. Nice, the old man said with a grin, but not nice enough. His grin deepened as Harry slumped to the ground. What happened? Harry asked dumbly. Age, experience, and treachery won again, the diminutive charms professor explained. Care to try again? Sure, Harry agreed gamely. All right, stand up, Flitwick instructed. The two of them faced each other. Stretch. Harry complied. He also cast a couple small spells. What were those? Flitwick asked curiously. Medical charms, Harry said. I learned them from Madame Pomfrey earlier. They don't look like healing charms. They're not, Professor. Right then, holster your wand and bow. Flitwick's smile turned devious. On 3. 1, 2. He cast a hex at the boy and was shocked to his core that the boy had already moved out of the way. His shock was so profound that Harry's returning hexes ended the fight. Harry's grin looked ready to split his face as he undid the spells he cast on his professor. Nice reflexes. I had a bit of help, Harry said smugly. I've gotta tell, the former dueling champ asked in dismay. Even years off the circuit, it was still disturbing news for the ex-champion. I cheated, Harry explained. The medical charm I cast allowed me to monitor your heart rate. It sped up a bit before I cast, didn't it? Flitwick laughed. Well done. I didn't expect it to work so well, Harry admitted. Well, it did, Flitwick said gamely. Would you mind undoing the hex you used on my hands? What hex? Harry asked dumbly. The one you used to transfigure the bones in my hand to remove the joints, and that was another accident, wasn't it? Yes, Professor, Harry admitted sheepishly. Well, help me to the hospital wing and report to your head of house. I dare say that Minerva will enjoy the opportunity of figuring it out with you, Flitwick said firmly. Deciding that he'd pressed his luck with the school healer enough for this quarter. I guess so, Harry agreed glumly. He wasn't sure how he'd get anything done with another extra class added to his schedule. The engineer got a bit worried when the girls went quiet, something that was rarely a good thing when children were playing, and elected to investigate. Everything all right? He asked. We're just putting the finishing touches on our design, Hermione said proudly. Mind if I take a look? Go ahead, Hermione agreed. Is something the matter? Luna inquired. Why don't we turn out a model of this so we can find out? The engineer suggested. Shouldn't take more than a couple hours, he added. And it'll give us a chance to see how all the tools work, Hermione enthused. Thank you. Happy to help, the old man said with a grin. The grin that bloomed on Professor McGonagall's face after she heard what had happened with the bones in the charms master's hand tripped every warning instinct that Harry possessed. It isn't supposed to work like that, Minerva said cheerfully. Looks as if we have a lot of work to do before we'll be able to figure this out, Mr. Potter. Yes, Professor, Harry dolefully agreed. I'm glad you're as excited about it as I am. Minerva ignored Harry's downcast look. Come along then, Mr. Potter, the sooner we get started, the sooner we can finish the other errands on our list. Other errands? Harry said in confusion, a spark of horror beginning to grow. We need to get you some new clothing to make you presentable, Minerva explained, for Ms. Granger's parents. The Charms Conference, and hopefully the Transfiguration trade show, she thought to herself. Not to mention all the other things we'll need to take care of nowda. You've revealed your talent in transfiguration. Oh well, I suppose sleep is for the weak, Mr. Potter. Yes, Professor, Harry agreed, the spark growing into a raging inferno. They set up their model and the engineer hustled the two girls behind a large steel barricade. Must we be so far back? Hermione asked with an uncharacteristically petulant look on her face. She really wanted to observe the test of the new steam engine up close. Safety first, the engineer said cheerfully. Fine, Hermione gave her unhappy assent, but I want to be able to give it a closer inspection the next time we fire it so that I can. Boom. Her jaw dropped in shock as the engine exploded, scattering pieces over a large portion of the field. Oh, that was ever so much fun. Luna clapped her hands. May we pretty please do it again? She batted her eyes lashes at the engineer. I dare say that it'll happen again. The old man laughed. He turned to Hermione. That, young lady, is why we stay back when we test out new things. But what happened? Hermione stammered. She'd been so sure that their design was perfect, the thought that such a catastrophic failure could occur had never crossed her mind. You forgot to put in a safety valve, he explained gently. Bet it's one thing you'll never forget again, Yeah, Hermione agreed weakly. But I was so sure. You two did a marvelous job, the engineer assured her. Just left out a few things. Which you noticed right away, Hermione noted aloud. I have been doing this longer than either of you have been alive, he said a trifle smugly. Longer than both of you together have been alive. Come on, we'll have some lunch and continue the lesson. Inside. But you could have pointed it out and then we wouldn't have blown this one up, she protested. Yes, I could have, the engineer agreed affably. But then you would be more likely to make the same mistake again. This way you'll never forget about the safety valve or anything with the word safety attached to it while building the next one. We learn more from our failures than from our successes, she quoted from memory, remembering one of her mother's lectures. That in building the same thing repeatedly, the old man added. He grinned. It was always fun to bring a couple aspiring engineers into the fold. What mistake makes the prettiest explosion? Luna inquired with a wide grin. Loon. Hermione's voice trailed off as she changed her mind about whatever she had been about to say. Let's save that for when we know we've bollocksed up something beyond repair. I'm sure we'll have enough explosions without intentionally causing them. That you will, the engineer said cheerfully. He led the girls to the shed's small kitchen area and pulled a largish pot off one of the shelves. Do you know what this is? He held out an odd-looking pot. It appears to be a pressure cooker, Hermione replied. It is, the old man agreed. Do you know what this thing on top is? Safety valve, Hermione said weakly. Yep, pressure gets too high and this bleeds off a bit of steam which in turn lowers the pressure. He scratched his chin thoughtfully. I'm telling you this so you don't feel too bad. Guy that invented these things forgot the safety valve too. I won't in the future, Hermione said in a subdued tone. I know ye won't, he agreed. My experience has shown me that people don't tend to forget practical lessons. Now then, this lesson isn't so much about steam as it is about cooking. Cooking. You don't think we eat rocks, do you? The old engineer laughed. Food is important for morale. Can we blow that up too? Luna asked hopefully. Not unless we overfill it or block the safety valve, he replied, which you are not going to do. Luna pouted, ramping up her cuteness factor by at least a factor of 10. None of that, he admonished. So then, do either of you know how to cook? We were taught how to do potions by Professor Snape, Hermione offered. That's a no then, he translated with a smile. Wonderful. Wonderful, Hermione echoed, wondering why he seemed so happy about that fact. Yep, he agreed. We've got lessons in pressure and in cooking. Multitasking. Quote, we're also making lunch for the crew, Luna pointed out. 3 things at once. Right you are, girl. Sharp-dressed man. The air tasted strange and Harry was more than a bit nervous as he followed his head of house into a rather fancy-looking haberdasher in an unfamiliar magical district. Everything felt off for some reason that he couldn't place his finger on, and it wasn't just because the sun wasn't where he thought it was supposed to be. Where are we, Professor? Harry asked. The boy's hand automatically went to his wand as he scanned the area for threats. London, Minerva replied absently. Ontario, she added with a grin upon seeing his skeptical look. Canada, half a heartbeat later at the boy's continued look of incomprehension. The professor. Esser made a mental note to make an offhanded comment to Ms. Granger about her best friend's lack of geographical knowledge, figuring that would solve the issue without the need for further work on her part. Oh, Harry took a few moments to absorb the fact that he'd just made his first trip abroad. Don't I need permission to leave the country, Professor? Normally you would, Yes, Minerva agreed. The fact that you're an orphan gives me a certain amount of leeway, shall we say, Wennings. Do not worry about getting into trouble, Mr. Potter. The situation has been handled. I see. The boy considered the matter. Why didn't you give me permission to visit Hogsmeade in third year, Professor? Harry asked curiously. It was thought that you had a notorious killer after you, and it was Reese. One that putting you in a location in which he could easily get to. You would not have been in your best interests, Minerva said reasonably. She decided to refrain from mentioning the fact that Albus had forbidden it or the fact that the other children had been permitted to go only over her strenuous objections. Oh. I understand, Professor, Harry said. Good. Now then, let's be about it, shall we? Minerva's raised her voice. Andy, are you here? Aunt Minerva, a woman's voice replied from the back. Victoria, Minerva said in surprise. What are you doing here? Dad wanted to spend the day with the grandkids, and I wanted some freedom from the rotten little monkeys, so we worked out a deal that benefited both of us, the girl replied. Who's this? She focused on Harry. Another relative. One of my students, Minerva replied. He needs a new wardrobe, so I brought him here to get one. I trust that you can accommodate. Of course, Auntie Minty, the woman agreed. Magical or mundane? Both. I want him to be ready for every situation he might encounter, from formal to informal. Really? Harry's danger senses spiked at the look of glee on the woman's face. Just let me grab the tape. The woman dashed into the back. How well do you know her, Professor? Harry whispered. The eager gleam that had lit the woman's eyes did not inspire confidence. I watched her grow up, Minerva replied. Her father is one of my brothers-in-law. She's a good girl, just gets a bit excitable at times. There, she said, eyeing Harry in the same manner in which Hedwig eyed a plate full of bacon. Now no one can disturb us until we've gotten you properly fitted. Hermione would never have admitted it, but she was more than a bit nervous to see the men's reactions as they tried the soup she and Luna had helped make. How is it? Luna asked with her seemingly endless cheer. A slight intake of breath was the only outward sign that she was anxious about the answer. Great, one of the firemen replied. Better than usual anyway. Yay. Luna cheered, bouncing up and down in jubilation and excitement. Did you hear that, Hermione? They said it was great. Yes, Luna, I heard, Hermione agreed with a smile. None of the men saw fit to mention that they'd have cheerfully ladled spoons full of bunker oil into their mouths if it would have made the two young girls happy. They had become quite fond of the two children in the short time that they'd started hanging around the shop. Minerva took a few moments to examine her student in the latest outfit that her niece had forced upon the poor boy. What had started as a short trip to buy a couple suits and a few casual outfits had quickly turned into an impromptu fashion show with only one model. She'd have felt guilty if not faux. The obvious joy on her niece's face and the fact that the boy didn't seem to be too put out by the attention he was getting. How do you feel, Mr. Potter? Minerva asked carefully, wanting to confirm that the lad wasn't being overwhelmed. A bit strange to be wearing a great kilt, Professor, Harry replied with a doubtful look on his face, misunderstanding the question. Are you sure I'm going to need one of these? No, Minerva replied with a suppressed grin. I am not. I am, however, quite sure that my niece will not allow you to leave without it. What should we dress him in next? The aforementioned woman asked gleefully. How about a tuxedo? What do you think, Auntie Minty? Don't you think he'd look good in a tux? She gave the boy a once-over. Maybe morning attire after that. And then, well, what wardrobe is complete without a set of tweeds? The grin on the woman's face was nothing short of manic. I'll be right back. She darted back into the stockroom. At least the air on my bits feels nice. Harry muttered, too quiet for anyone but a cat animagus to hear. Minerva managed to stifle her laughter, but only just. Ginny approached her slightly older brother with a worried expression on her face. She hadn't seen him in the company of the other members of the trio for quite some time. Come to think of it, she hadn't seen any of the members of the so-called Gold N trio spend any time with each other for at least a week, and she was worried about how her brother might be holding up. Got a minute, Ron? She asked. What's up, Ginny? Ron asked. Is something wrong? You tell me, Ginny sighed. What do you mean? Ron asked with a look of befuddlement on his face. You, Harry, and Hermione haven't been spending much time together lately, Ginny explained. I was worried. Hermione's become obsessed with something besides Hogwarts a history, and Harry keeps fumbling his casting and accidentally inventing new spells, Ron said with a grin. Meaning he has to go to extra classes with the professors. Oh, so, nothing's wrong then. Nope, Ron said cheerfully. Not unless you count the new wart on my second toe. Oh. So. Care for a game of chess? Ginny asked. You're on, Ron agreed. I'll even spot you a bishop. Ha. A queen, Ginny countered. You must be dreaming, Ron laughed. How about a knight and 4 pawns? Now who's dreaming? Ginny giggled. How long has it been since we played a game? Not long enough to forget that you're not nearly as bad as you like to pretend you are, Ron retorted. Minerva was beginning to get impatient. Harry had been in the changing room for several minutes and showed no sign of coming out. Mr. Potter, is something the matter? She prompted. I'm not coming out, Harry said stubbornly. Just give me my clothes and... What did she give you? Minerva sighed. AKKKK, he choked. Speedos are in, her niece said with a shrug. You will not do that again, Minerva said firmly. Am I understood? Yes, Aunt Minerva. Good. You will make your apologies to Mr. Potter after he's had a chance to make himself decent. The engineer watched with a proud grin as the 2 girls went back to He designed their sketches to include safety valves, with a satisfied smile on his face. That was one catastrophic error down, several dozen more to go. Ready to build another model then? He asked. I'd like to try out this new design for a safety first, Luna said brightly. Want to make something else explode, do you? He laughed. No, Luna said quickly, I wish to see if it works. The fact that I am certain it will explode is due to my inexperience rather than my intention, and I intend to enjoy that inexperience for as long as it takes to educate it out of myself. Something that will no doubt include a number of large and entertaining explosions, she finished with a wide excited grin. Win situation then, he agreed. It works. It doesn't. Boom. Luna giggled, throwing her arms out to mimic her new favorite thing in the world. They threw together another quick model and set it up to watch the results. Luna was not disappointed as this model also chose to explode and scatter parts of itself over a large area. What happened? Hermione asked in confusion. Can you tell us, Luna? The engineer asked. Luna ignored the question in favor of giggling and clapping. Luna. Luna looked over. To be honest, I haven't the faintest. If my calculations were correct, it should have worked. It would have if you'd make these small changes. He sketched out a quick diagram. Do you see? I believe so, Luna agreed. Thank you. Harry looked at the large pile of clothing with a sense of dawning horror. There was no way, she couldn't expect him to. Why did the universe always seem like it was conspiring against him? Do I really need all of that, Professor? He whispered. Do you want to be the one to tell her that you don't? Minerva asked mildly. No, Professor, I thought not, Minerva said with a GG to put it all. I suppose we could pick you up a charmed valise before we head back to Hogwarts, Minerva mused. More shopping? Harry asked in dismay. Just a bit, Minerva agreed sympathetically. Buck up, Mr. Potter, Gryffindors don't shrink away from unpleasantness. Yes, Professor, Harry agreed grumpily. This was almost worse than fighting Voldemort. At least he could run if things started to turn when going against Voldemort. Maybe he should have let the damned hat sort him into Slytherin after all. He doubted Snape would have bothered to take him out shopping. A thought crossed his mind. Actually, that would be exactly the sort of thing the bastard would do if he found out how unpleasant he'd found the whole experience. He shuddered at the thought of having to go out shopping with Snape every week, having to endure the unpleasantness of shopping combined with the man's snide comments and smug enjoyment of his discomfort. Harry sighed. Some days he just couldn't win. Luna mentally went over one of the conversations she'd had with Hermione. She wasn't sure, but there was something about it that was bothering her. In a flash she had it. Now how to bring it up without jeopardizing her newfound friendship with the other girl. Best just be direct about it, Luna decided. No point in beating around the bush. Luna looked over at her friend. Hermione. What is it, Luna? Hermione looked up from the drafting table. You mentioned that you were planning to have Harry spend a portion of the winter holiday with you. Luna began slowly. Hermione agreed. Why? Does Harry know? Luna asked. I asked because I don't recall you telling me that you asked him over, just that you were planning to. Did he tell you he had any? Luna asked. No, Hermione admitted. Has he ever had any plans before? Well, no, but then I wouldn't worry about it, Luna said cheerfully. But this year might be different, Hermione cried. I can't believe I forgot. Just be sure to ask him when he gets back, Luna said soothingly. Everything will be fine, Hermione. Thank you for reminding me, Luna. What are friends for, Hermione? Luna. Yes, Hermione. Would you like to spend some time at my house over the holiday? Hermione asked. It's fine if you'd rather spend time with your father, Hermione added quickly. I just thought. That would be wonderful, Luna squealed, pulling the larger girl into a hug. Thank you, Hermione. It was so nice to finally have friends, she mused, enjoying the warm feeling inspired by the thought. Hermione ambushed Harry the moment he walked into the Gryffindor common room. Burdened as the boy was by a large valise, he didn't have a chance. Harry, Hermione squeaked as she stepped into his personal space. Would you like to visit my house during winter holiday? Is it all right with your parents? Harry asked. It was their idea. Sure, Harry agreed, thank you. It sounded much better than spending his time off in a drafty castle in the middle of a Scottish winter. Great, the girl cheered. I'll get to work on our schedules. He asked weakly. Both study and event, Hermione said excitedly. It'll be so grand. You'll see, Harry. Still better than the Dursleys and still marginally better than a drafty castle, he mused to himself as he watched his friend dart up the stairs to her dorm. Minerva was surprised, nay shocked to find the headmaster waiting for her when she got back to her office. May I have a moment, Minerva? The old man asked without his usual cheerfulness. What is it, Albus? I hear that you gave Ms. Granger permission to invite Harry to her house over the winter holiday, Albus began. Is this true? What if it is? Minerva challenged. It's well within my rights to grant permission as his head of house. Just because you can do something, doesn't mean that you should. A lesson that you would do well to learn yourself, Minerva snipped. It isn't healthy for children their age to live the sort of life that you've chosen to inflict on poor Mr. Potter. Minerva, listen to reason. You must understand that. No, you must understand, Minerva interrupted. You must understand that I am not content to sit idly by while you trample my responsibilities in your obsession with Mr. Potter. I allowed you to place him with those dreadful muggles. I allowed you to keep him confined to the castle. I said nothing when you kept sending him back to those horrible people. I aided you in so many ways that I have no doubt James and Lily would have hexed me into oblivion if they'd have lived to see what we did to their child. No more, Albus, I will not sit by and allow these transgressions to continue any longer. And it seems that we no longer have anything to say to each other on this matter, Albus said sadly when he realized that he really couldn't justify his actions as being what was best for the boy, even to himself. Good evening, Minerva. Good evening, Headmaster. Hermione walked down to the engine shed after classes to find Luna already in the shop's small library, immersed in a large book. Good afternoon, Luna, Hermione said politely as she examined the stack to determine which book to take down for herself. Luna looked up with a cute expression of bewilderment on her face. Hermione, come look at this. What is it, Luna? It's a Stirling engine, Luna replied, her face alight with excitement. They were invented to be a safer alternative to steam engines. Not very efficient thought, Hermione mused. Not the ones they've built so far, Luna agreed. But it says here that they're capable of being almost perfectly efficient in theory. Yeah, Hermione mumbled thoughtfully. How are we going to improve it to that point? You mustn't forget the fact that we are witches, Hermione, Luna pointed out. Meaning we have access to tools and techniques the muggles do not. True, Hermione agreed with a slowly growing smile. Great idea, Luna. Who knows what we can come up with using solid muggle theory and magical tools. Thank you, Hermione. Anne Granger was going over the latest bit of correspondence she'd received from Minerva when the door to the study opened to admit her husband, who looked entirely too pleased with himself for anyone's good. How was your day, Philip. She asked. Fairly productive, he replied. Made life difficult for some people, made a bit of money, bought a new string of polo ponies, the usual. Oh, you bought some polo ponies? Anne exclaimed. Whatever for? Don't we already have a stable full? For Harry's use when he visits, Philip replied. Not a one of the new ones is a day under 8 years old, so they all know more about the game than most of the players, and each of them was carefully selected for their disposition. I figure he can learn the basics from them before moving on to one of the younger horses if he gets interested in the game. Tack. Put an order in yesterday, he said proudly. Everything should be done by the time the children arrive for the winter holidays. Exactly the sort of behavior I expect to see from the decadent commercial class, she sneered. How many houses could be built with even a fraction of the funds you chose to waste on frivolities? A fair few, I'd say, he admitted. B.U. Better a decadent capitalist than a spoiled blue blood that's never been a productive member of society, especially one that's chosen to glorify the noble underclass and their so-called struggles against their employers, he growled back. What does someone like you know of an honest day's work? How many of those workers, the ones you pretend to care about, do you think I've helped buy houses the profits they've made from my orders? The thought never crossed your mind, did it? So how was your day? Philip asked in a normal voice. I had a particularly difficult extraction from a particularly difficult patient who was much less important than she thought she was and who should never gotten past my appointment secretary to see me personally. That I will be more than delighted to discuss with you. You know I hate it when you break the mood like that. I know it gets you worked up when I do, he agreed with a grin. But I suppose one cannot expect too much from a feckless aristo. Luna and Hermione were both getting more and more frustrated as their search of the shop's small library failed to produce much that they'd be able to use in their new engine project. It's a shame that we're not in the colonies, Luna sighed. Or that the biker didn't survive the war. Yeah, Hermione agreed. Wait, what biker? Luna, Hermione interrupted the girl's tale. She was not in the mood to put up with any of her friend's crazy tales at the moment. Wait, did you say flying motorbike? You did, didn't you? I believe I did, Hermione. Luna paused. But perhaps I didn't. She scratched her chin. I suppose either is possible. It's an interesting philosophical question. I think I did, therefore I did. I think I did not, therefore I did not even thought I did. Come on. Hermione grabbed the other girl by the wrist and began dragging her towards the castle. We need to talk to someone. We do. All right, if you say so, Hermione. Luna happily trailed behind the other girl, and to wait to find out when she found out. It had to be one of the most awkward staff meeting that Albus Dumbledore had ever been in, let alone chaired. Half his staff was glaring at the other half his staff, and while it was far from unusual for them to swap glares with his potions master, they usually had much better relations with each other. Look at that, he said suddenly. It took everything the headmaster had not to wilt when the glares shifted to him. I'm afraid I must be going. I'm needed elsewhere to handle something vitally important at the ministry, he said suddenly. Minerva. I'm afraid that I'm going to have to ask you to direct the rest of the meeting. Of course, headmaster. Goodbye all, Dumbledore said as he rushed out of the room. He did not go to the ministry. Well then, Minerva said after her superior had left the room. I think it's time we got down to business. I have better things to do than to sit here with all of you, Snape announced before standing up and sweeping out of the room. I still think he enchants his robes to get them to do that, Minerva muttered. Back to the matter at hand, what's got all of you in such a snit? We're sick of it, Sinistra growled. Don't think for a moment that we're willing to stand for it even a second longer. Stand for what? Minerva asked with a frown, honestly mystified. The way you've all got exciting research projects with Harry Potter and we don't, Professor Babbling explained hotly. We want to be a part of it as well. We're tired of being left behind and we won't stand for it any longer. Yeah, Vector agreed. We want a chance to show what we can do. Just because we teach electives doesn't mean we don't deserve research projects that will revolutionize magic as we know it and inspire future generations with our discoveries. He doesn't even take runes or AR. But he does do Quidditch, Hooch interrupted. Don't think there aren't things I can teach him about how to handle a broom. Don't be vulgar, Rolanda. Sinistra giggled. At least not while he's still a student. Now who's being vulgar, Aurora? Hooch retorted. That's not remotely what I meant and you know it. Why don't we get back to the issue at hand? Minerva fighting to bring some semblance of order back into the meeting. All those interested in taking ownership of some portion of Mr. Potter's free time, please raise your hand. Everyone at the table raised a hand. All right. I propose we wait for Mr. Potter to make another mistake and assign him to someone based on that. What if he doesn't? Or, what if we teach a subject which is unlikely to be related to one of his mistakes such as astronomy or runes? He's bound to get into some sort of trouble soon, Minerva replied. We'll just use that as an excuse. Luna and Hermione literally ran into their headmaster when they rounded a corner and collided with the old man. Are both you girls all right? Dumbledore asked with a grandfatherly smile. We are, headmaster, Luna replied after a short inspection of both herself and her companion. Or rather, we appear to be. Excellent. He helped the girls to their feet and turned to leave. Professor Dumbledore, Hermione called out, shocking herself with how bold she'd become. What is it? May we use the flow to contact someone? I believe that would be permissible, he agreed cheerfully. Depending of course on exactly whom it is that you would like to contact. Professor Lupin, Hermione said. In that case I have no objections and you have my unrestricted permission. You may use the connection in my office if you'd like, he offered. Thank you, sir. Hermione smiled at her friend. Come along, Luna. Thank you, headmaster, Luna chirped before allowing herself to be pulled along. Minerva looked around the room to assure herself that everyone was satisfied with the deal they'd worked out. It's agreed then, she asked sternly. We will all give Mr. Potter extra class during our normal office hours using a schedule to be agreed upon at a later date. Point of order, Minerva. Sprout called out. Will these classes be open to every student that wishes to take them? Of course, McGonagall said quickly. Well, within reason. What do you mean by that? Just that there are certain students that I would ban from my normal classes if the headmaster allowed it. And that I have no intention of teaching them in my copious amounts of free time. I think that sounds reasonable, Sprout agreed. Any objections? There were none. In that case, I think we've come to the beginnings of an agreement. Harry felt another chill go down his back, a chill he'd last felt when they'd pulled his name out of the cup and forced him into the Triwizard Tournament. Nothing absolutely horrible had just happened involving him. I better ask the professors if I can have more classes, Harry said regretfully to himself. He'd want to be prepared for whatever Voldemort decided to throw at him. A couple new spells could spell the difference between life and death in his next face-off against the Dark Lord. Remus stepped through the fireplace into the headmaster's office and regarded the girls with a fond smile. Thanks to his condition, the werewolf had accepted the fact that he'd never be able to have children of his own, so he regarded Harry and his friends as the closest he'd ever get to having a family. What can I do for you two? He asked. Well, it's just that, Hermione dithered. Harry once mentioned something about Snuffles and I thought that it might be helpful for a project we're doing and you knew him better than anyone else and I was hoping that. What it? Remus prompted gently. We wanted to gather information on a flying motorbike, Luna supplied cheerfully. Much more willing to be direct than her friend. Hermione seems to think you might have some information on it. We would also like to examine it if at all possible, Hermione added quickly. Really? We're happy to get whatever we can though. You want to know about Sirius's old bike? Remus asked in surprise. I'm not sure what happened to it. Oh. Hermione drooped. I think his notes are still back at Grimmauld Place, Remus offered. I could get them for you if you'd like. Thank you Remus, Hermione said sweetly. Anything for one of Harry's friends, Remus replied. Where do you want me to deliver it? Do you know where they keep the Hogwarts Express? As promised, Remus delivered Sirius notes on construction, Zen, and the art of the maintenance of magical motorbikes along with a large crate containing a number of mysterious items. What's all this? Hermione asked. I found an old motorcycle that Sirius used as his model and the tools he used to disassemble it, Remus replied. I'm not sure you want it all though. Why not? The motorcycle is in pieces and the tools have to be at least 15 years old, Remus EXPLTHE fact that Sirius had probably gotten them used. Chances were they were hopelessly out of date by now with the way Muggles were always changing things. Wanted to make sure you didn't want any of it before I threw it out. No, Hermione said quickly. It's perfect. Thank you, Remus. Happy to help. The werewolf grinned. I'd also be happy to bring you anything else I find like this if you want. Please, Hermione agreed. Hermione decided to do a quick look over Sirius notes while Luna decided to investigate the parts bin. Two things became quickly apparent as she read over the first couple pages. The first was that Sirius Black had horrible penmanship. The second was that the man was a bloody genius when it came to adapting Muggle devices to work on magic. Hermione, Luna called out. What is it, Luna? Hermione reluctantly dragged herself away from her reading material. Do you have any idea what this part is? Luna asked, holding up a shrunken part with an inquisitive look on her face. I think that's the frame, Luna. Hermione replied after a quick glance at the object in the other girl's hand. I'm not absolutely positive, but I can't think of anything else it might be. Just how many frames does a motorcycle have? Just one, Hermione said absently. Wait, why? Because there are at least 6 or 7 of these frames in the box, Hermione. Luna peered down into the box. Maybe more under the pile. Oh, I guess it makes sense that Sirius would want to look at more than one motorcycle before making his own, Hermione said slowly. Do you think Harry would like it if we put them back together? Luna asked, focusing an intense stare on the other girl while she waited for the answer. 2 heads are better than 1. Professor Vector favored Harry with a predatory look as walked into her classroom. If his performance in the other classes was any indication, he would help her rewrite the laws of magic and usher in a new age of discovery. Do you know why you're here, Mr. Potter? She drawled. No, Professor. The boy managed to keep the nervousness out of his voice. The professor was eyeing him like Dudley eyed anything edible. You are here because of the research that you've been doing with the other professors. She explained with a toothy grin. Oh, what am I going to be doing with you, Professor? We are going to see if we can figure out why and how your new spells work, Professor Vector purred. Wonderful, don't you think? Why? Why do we need to know how they work? Harry asked hesitantly. Based on her reaction, he knew instantly that he had said the wrong thing. Why? She barked, eyes shining with madness and suppressed rage. Do you think we should be content to leave things as they are? Do you think that we shouldn't expend the necessary effort to perfect your new spells? No, Harry ventured, not sure he agreed with the answer but fairly sure he wouldn't like what happened if he tried to give another. Of course not, she agreed firmly. Quote, glad to see that you have more sense than the average wizard, Mr. Potter. Of course not, he echoed. Why did his life have to be so bloody complicated? It was like he was the universe's spittoon or something. What he needed was a nice quiet vacation round the world away from all this craziness. Better not do it under my own name though, he thought to himself. No telling how many crazies I'd run into. Much safer to do it with an alias like Mr. John Smith, or Mr. Dean Longbottom, or, he had a flash of inspiration, Mr. Something Black. Sirius would have appreciated the thought of Harry ing his family name to have a bit of fun. Now how to get away with it without anyone recognizing him. Had to be a spell or item or something that would help with that. Harry made a mental note to look into the matter at a later date. I foresee quite a bit of work ahead of us, she added cheerfully. I hope you don't mind 16-hour days, working meals, and no weekends to speak of. I do have other classes, you know. Professor, he pointed out. He thought it imprudent at that moment to point out that he also had a life outside academics. Yes, she agreed. But this is your only important class. The amount of conviction in the woman's voice was nothing short of terrifying. Understood. I do, but I don't believe the other professors will, Professor. Then you'll have to be extra convincing when you explain it to them. Won't you, Mr. Potter? She laughed. Think of it. Think of the discoveries we're about to make. Yes, Professor, Harry said glumly. He made another mental note too. Study extra hard to ensure that he'd cast every spell correctly the first time and every subsequent time in the future. A couple small mistakes had caused the professors to go mad, he shuddered too. How bad it would get if he made any more or if they witnessed any of his more unusual mistakes. Maybe he could get Ron or Neville to do something to distract them. He mused to himself. Maybe it would be better to split their attention by giving them other targets to focus on. Sure, betraying his friends to a fate worse than death didn't sound very good when he thought about it out loud, but that was no reason not to consider it. Luna cheered as they got their first engine to start. It wasn't much, but they were fairly sure that they'd managed to separate enough parts to reassemble one of the motorcycles. It was fortunate that Sirius has squirreled away a number of maintenance manuals with his copious and highly detailed notes. Nice work, Luna, Hermione congratulated her friend. Nice work, Hermione, Luna returned proudly. The two girls smiled at each other before turning back to the mountain of parts yet to be sorted. Ron was waiting when Harry finally managed to escape the professor and stumble back into the Gryffindor common room. You all right, mate? Ron asked in concern. What day is it? Harry dodged the question. Sunday. Why? 'Cause I've been doing classes all day, Harry sighed. Sure, he'd asked for a few extra sessions, but he'd never expected them to take it as far as they had. I'd almost rather be at the Dursleys'. Nah, but a nap in the cupboard under the stairs is sounding bloody attractive. As the one place in the house guaranteed to be and to have always been Dursley-free, he was actually rather fond of his first bedroom. Bloody heck, mate. Ron winced. Anything I can do to help? Maybe if you'd come along it would distract the professors away from me, Harry suggested. Or made a few interesting spell mistakes so they'd focus on you for a bit to give me a break. Anything besides that? Ron asked mildly. I mean, ask me to go fight a 1,000-year basilisk by your side, no problem. Extra class, well, that's something else, isn't it? I saved your life, Harry protested. Only a couple times, Ron said reasonably. Ask for one of my kidneys or something. Or, hey, we could go visit the giant spiders in the forest, that'll wash the tired right out of you. Don't think an extra kidney would help, Harry said sourly. Not in the mood for dealing with spiders bigger than Fluffy either. Well, the offer's on the table if you think of a way they will help. Ron scratched his chin. Least you've got Hermione's house to hide out in during halls, Ron said thoughtfully. Professors can't get you there. Where I'll have to put up with is Hermione constantly badgering me to study, Harry said brightly. That's pretty much the standard all year anyway, that won't be so bad. As distracted as she's been, I'll bet she won't even badger you that much. Ron grinned. See. It ain't so bad, mate. How much longer till we get out? Just a few more days, Ron assured his friend. A dozen or so actually, but he saw no point in being overly negative. You think you can last that long? If I can't, then promise that you and Hermione will look after Hedwig. I promise, Ron agreed solemnly. The redhead made a mental note to make sure one of the professors were watching any of his first casting attempts. Minerva was making a few last-minute adjustments to her lasso open to admit the head of Hufflepuff House. As always, the woman had a vacuum flask in one hand which was no doubt filled with a delightful herbal blend. A basket in the other, likely filled with an assortment of baked goods. And almost certainly a more conventional flask tucked into her left boot filled with something to give the tea a bit of kick. Minerva, may I have a moment? What can I do for you, Pomona? Minerva replied. I was just wondering if we were pushing Mr. Potter a bit too hard. The other professor explained. He's starting to look a bit ragged. Left unsaid was how much of a shame it would be if they burned the boy out and lost the shonk. To see where his potential would take him in the future. Yes, he is, Minerva sighed. You didn't tell him about your concerns, did you? Heavens no, Pomona laughed. Wouldn't want him to get the idea that he might have limits. Would you mind explaining to me why you're pushing him so hard? Phileas and I talked about it and we agreed that we're going to push Mr. Potter as hard as we can for the foreseeable future, Minerva began. On the matter of his health, Poppy has been watching him closer than she usually does, and as to why, she shook her head sadly. Well, he does have several dark wizards out to kill him, doesn't he? Life before limb, Pomona said solemnly. Not to mention his horrible luck, which would no doubt ensure any number of attempts on his life even without the Dark Lord to worry about. Minerva sighed heavily. At this stage it's more important to ensure he makes it to adulthood than to coddle him in some misguided belief that giving him the illusion of normalcy is more important than his continued survival. Albus is still being stubborn. Albus has forbidden us to give Mr. Harry any extra training or special treatment since, quote, it wouldn't be fair to the boy to rob him of his normal childhood or to the other students to miss out on the extra instruction. Minerva snorted, as if he had any left after growing up with those poor excuses for human beings. The guilt for her part in placing him there would haunt her for the rest of her days. All she could do now was her best to prepare the boy for the fight everyone knew was coming and to hope that it was enough to bring victory. But he is willing to allow Mr. Potter to aid us in our research, Sprout said in understanding. Research being completely different from training, of course. Albus is an academic and a researcher before he's anything else, Minerva giggled. It's one of his many blind spots along with his asinine belief in the inherent goodness of humanity. Tell him that Mr. Potter's accidentally created a new spell and that you need him to help research and he rubber stamps every request that goes along with it. The fact that Mr. Potter happens to get a bit of extra training along with that research, well, that's just a happy accident. Not our purpose at all. Neatly sidestepping the headmaster's edict against training, the other professor agreed. Thank you for taking me into your confidence like this, Minerva. Not at all, Pomona. Harry woke up late that morning. Monday meant that he didn't have any morning research sessions with any of the professors, and was able to sleep until a bit after 7. A quick check of his schedule confirmed that he had double potions after breakfast. He frowned. If someone had told him at the beginning of the year had he'd see potions class as a time to relax, then Harry would have laughed in their face. Guess it makes sense, Harry muttered to himself as he walked out of the common room. Worst Snape can do is take points and mark me down when I make a mistake, the other professors. Harry shuddered. Besides, it's not like he can assign detentions anymore, not after the other professors already divvied up my time among themselves. A smile bloomed on his face as he imagined the likely reaction if the greaseball tried. Pity he didn't have divination or history till Wednesday. He really needed a chance to catch up on his sleep. Luna and Hermione met up after classes and rushed down to the train shed to continue their latest project. The temperature dropped and the smell of oil and steel hit them as soon as they entered the building. It took some time for their eyes to adjust to the darkness and they immediately set upon one of the men with their request after they could see well enough to find him. Course I can do it. One of the old machinists agreed after they had explained to him what they wanted. Still in all, I think it's a bit of a shame that you girls have moved away from steam and into internal combustion though. He was of the opinion that internal combustion was not more than a passing fad and that people would soon realize that and go back to external combustion for all their transportation needs. The less said about diesel electric, the better. We just need to confirm something, Hermione explained. Oh yes, Luna agreed, it would be best not to attempt to adapt the spells we found to enchant internal combustion to steam or Stirling engines without a couple tests to make sure that we have a good idea of how they work on internal combustion. Safety first, Hermione added cheerfully. Glad you lasses have that one down, the old machinist rumbled in approval. Give me a few and I'll have the parts turned out. Thanks, Hermione said. Yes, Luna agreed, we really appreciate what you're doing for us. I doubt we could do even a tenth of what we have without your aid, Hermione agreed. Please let us know if there is anything we can do for you in return. Harry watched the other students file out of the Transfiguration classroom with a forlorn look on his face. Sometimes he wondered what it was like to be normal, to be free, to not have to dodge constant murder attempts from dark wizards and their minions. To be able to go through life without having to constantly be on the lookout for plots and intrigue. Must be nice, he decided after a few moments of thought. Must be real nice. Thank you for staying behind, Mr. Potter. Minerva smiled. I understand that it can't be easy to give up so much free time. Yes, Professor. Like I have a choice. What are we doing today? You are going to go down to the Quidditch pitch for a bit of instruction from Madam Hooch, Minerva said warmly. We thought it best to give you a bit of time to relax. Unless you'd rather not do a bit of flying, that is. If that's the case, I can think of a number of things I'd like to look into. It was cute the way he thought the castle wards weren't reporting high-s secret practice sessions or the sheer number of intriguing errors they'd created. Of course not, Professor. Harry said quickly. I mean, of course I'd like to do a bit of flying. As much as possible. On your way. Yes, Professor. Harry was almost out the door before her voice stopped him. And don't think I didn't notice that you transfigured your pillbox into a two-headed mouse, Minerva said with an amused smile. When Madame Hooch is finished with you, I want you to come back here so we can figure out exactly how you did that. Yes, Professor. Harry agreed with considerably less enthusiasm. Minerva looked at the two-headed mouse in wonder as one head breathed fire on a fly that got too close and the other head darted forward to eat the fried insect. Perhaps it would be a good idea to speak with Hagrid to get his insights on the creature as well. He'd been one of the few professors that had not raised a stink about not getting a research project, and as the deputy head mistress, it was her duty to see that he was not left out. Hermione and Luna looked at their new motorbike with matching grins. While it was true that magic made creating things so much easier, it couldn't completely replace good old-fashioned elbow grease or the satisfaction that came with completing a difficult job. Okay. Hermione looked down. Why don't we play with the engine first? Comfort can wait. Luna agreed with sparkling eyes as she set aside the notes on the silencing and warming charms. After that we can do the destructive testing. We can figure out why Sirius notes say never to combine a couple of the charms. Hermione corrected. If that happens to be explosively destructive, then so be it. No doing anything to hasten that along. Of course not, Hermione. Luna agreed with a mostly innocent look on her face. I would never dream of hastening things along. Hermione shot the other girl a look of deep suspicion, not the least bit convinced by her friend's apparent sincerity. Harry got down to the Quidditch pitch and found the flight instructor waiting for him in the broom shed alongside a number of odd-looking tools and devices, the purpose of which the boy could not deduce in the slightest, but which recent experience with the other professors had taught him likely heralded mountains of extra work. You look like you have a question, she observed. Why am I here, Madame Hooch? Harry asked. The boy looked at his professor with bleary eyes. He hadn't been getting much sleep lately. First of all, you may be a good Quidditch player, but don't think that there are a few things that I can still teach you about flying. Of course not, Harry agreed quickly. I've read about your time in the league. Really? Yeah, Harry replied. Most people, including every Quidditch player at Hogwarts, say that you're the best chaser the Harpies ever had. I hadn't heard that, she said in an odd voice. It was nice to be appreciated. Back to the point, aside from flying, I'm also a fairly good broom maker. You mean? Harry perked up like he'd just taken a pepper-up potion. We're going to craft a broomstick, she said with a smile. Every bristle, every curve in the shaft, and every enchantment. Wow, Harry gasped. I'm not up to equaling a firebolt, of course, but it can't hurt to get a better idea of how to craft a broom. Of course not, Harry agreed. We'll start by making you a new wand. A wand? Harry asked in shock. Uses some of the same principles and is much easier to do with a limited amount of tools, she explained. I'm afraid we're going to have to wait for a large enough lathe to arrive to do the broom. She paused. This will also allow you to practice over winter holidays, as the monitoring charm they use to track underage magic is something I'll forget to cast on it. I think you can handle the responsibility, but be sure to obey the rules. I shall assume that you have spent enough time around the Weasley Wins to know that rule number 1 is don't get caught. Yes, Professor. How do we make a wand without the lathes? Fortunately, I was able to borrow a couple of small table lathes from my uncle. Shish. Identified two of the odd devices with a wave of her hand. Your uncle, ma'am. I believe you got your wand from him, she replied. Ollivander is your uncle. My mother's uncle actually, Hooch clarified. This wand we're going to craft probably won't be as good as the one you purchased. But after I make 100 of them, then they might be half as good. Harry suggested with a cheeky, if tired, grin. Hopefully not that many. Hooch laughed. Now, the first thing we need to do is. Hermione remotely started the engine on their newly constructed test bike and then ducked behind the blast shield to wait with Luna. Everything went well for a few seconds, so well that both girls ventured a curious peek around the barrier. Is it supposed to be smoking like that, Hermione? Luna asked curiously. It never did that any of the other times we started it. I don't. Boom. The newly constructed bike engine exploded and flung pieces everywhere. Hey. Luna clapped her hands. Let's do it again. And again until we figure out just why that bug-repelling charm makes it explode like that," Hermione agreed. "How did Sirius solve the problem?" Luna asked, still flush from excitement. "His notes say that he just let the bugs fly into his teeth," Hermione replied. "I don't think he cared why it didn't work, just that it didn't work." Hermione huffed. Like any typical wizard, he just ignored the whole thing. Quote, "It is quite fortunate that us witches are much more sensible than wizards," Luna cheerfully agreed. "I can't imagine what it must be like for the poor dears." Sensibly, Hermione bit her tongue before the traitorous thing could utter the first comment that popped into her mind. Ron looked up when Harry staggered into the room. His best friend looked like he'd been put through the ringer. "Never good to let the professors notice you." Harry was an example that no good ever came of it. "Let you off early today, mate?" Ron asked. "Madam Hooch is giving me a break," Harry replied. "Says she wants me to get in a short nap before we do anything else." "What's Hooch got you doing?" Ron asked curiously. "She's going to be teaching me Quidditch moves later," Harry replied. "Right now we're working on making wands and brooms." "Quidditch?" Ron asked with a frown. "She was a bloody good chaser, but what's she going to teach you about seeking?" "She's a bloody good seeker too," Harry laughed. "Showed me a couple things that I didn't know were possible to do on a broom." "Makes sense," Ron agreed slowly. "Couldn't hurt to learn a few chaser moves either." A couple thoughts began percolating around his brain. "Guess not," Harry agreed. "And since you're making brooms anyway," Ron grinned, "be sure to make an extra one for me, mate." "Won't be as good as my firebolt," Harry cautioned. "Not even half as good as my old Nimbus. But it'll be better than the school brooms, I'd wager," Ron said quickly. "Tell Hooch that I'd be happy to play keeper when you guys are practicing." "I will," Harry promised. "Get some sleep, mate," Ron advised. "You look like you need it." Even with the aid of magic, it took some time to fabricate a new test bike. Nay, Fair Girl would have dreamed of doing anything to any of Harry's bikes that might have even the slightest chance of damaging them. They both knew how much mementos of his lost family meant to the boy. Not being the sort to lay about while others did their work and lacking the skill to help out, the girls chose to channel their free time into their locomotive design project, hoping that after a few dozen revisions they might have something that both would not explode and would prove to be an improvement over current designs. "What do you think of this, Hermione?" Luna called out. "I'm fairly I've found a way to give our steam engine a 40% increase in power." Hermione squinted at it for a few seconds, lips moving as she mentally checked all of the other girls' calculations. "It should work. But with that much power we'd have a hard time making it stay on the rails," she complained. "Well, do we really need rails? I mean, I like trains, but the rails don't really matter to me. They were just bits of metal laying on the ground, hardly exciting at all and dead boring without all the tunnels and bridges. If we charm the wheels so they act like they are running on rails, there is nothing beneath them we could just take to the air and avoid the whole rail problem. I wonder how fast we need to go to leave the Earth. 7 miles per second for an unpowered object off the top of my head." Luna replied cheerfully. "Why do you ask?" "I've always wanted to visit the moon," Hermione admitted. Luna looked a bit lost. "What is it, Luna? I can't help you. Feel that there was a comment I could have made regarding that statement," Luna admitted, "seeing that my name means moon in Latin." "It'll come to you later," Hermione giggled. "Be sure to tell and we'll pretend you thought of it now. It'll make a nice touch when we write our memoirs," Luna agreed. "A touch or two of humor will make the whole thing much more accessible to the average person." Harry finished his nap and returned to the broom shed where he found Madam Hooch flipping through the latest edition of Women in Quidditch. 5 Ways to Commit Fouls Without the Ref Noticing, while waiting for him. "Have a good nap, Mr. Potter." "Yes, something you'd like to say, Mr. Potter." Years of teaching had made her adept at reading her students' expressions. Ron was wondering, if he could join us when we practice Quidditch, Harry said nervously. He said that he'd be more than happy to play keeper. "Of course," she agreed. "You may bring him with you when we meet tomorrow. If he stays late then we should have plenty of time to turn out a couple of blanks for him and he can get started on making his new wand right away." Don't think he was planning on doing anything that didn't involve flying. Harry wished immediately that he could take back his statement. If he doesn't want to show up to one portion of the lesson, then he can skip all of it, Madame Hooch said firmly. He's welcome to come, but he is not welcome to cherry-pick the tasks that he wishes to do. I'll tell him, Professor, Harry agreed. Was there anything else, Mr. Potter? Well, yes. Would it be possible to make a new wand out of this, Professor? Harry held out a long piece of wood. A piece of your old nimbus? Hooch asked with a raised eyebrow. She tried to think if she'd heard or read anything about making a wand blank out of wood that had previously been enchanted and came up blank. Yes, Professor. I don't know, she admitted. I don't believe I've ever heard of anyone attempting it before. She mentally debated writing her uncle to ask his advice on the subject before deciding not to. Worst thing they could do was fail, and she was curious to find out what would happen for herself. Bugger everyone else's hypothetical results. Oh. Harry drooped. None of that, Mr. Potter. She laughed at the expression on his face. What's the best way to find out if something can be done? To try it. Right, Professor. Right, she agreed. What were you planning to use for a core? Wing feather of an overprotective mothering owl, Harry replied. Don't recall anyone trying that either, she said oddly. Worth a shot, though it might be best to try it in a more conventional blank to prove the concept. And to try a more conventional core in one of my nimbus blanks, Harry agreed. I've spent enough time around Hermione to learn how important it is to have a control. The two girls set up their second test bike and prepared to carry out the experiment. The blast shield was up. The shield charms were up. Their safety goggles were on. All that was left was to see how things failed this time and to try to correct that in their next design. Eureka! I've got it! Luna squealed. I've got it, Hermione. The little blonde was bouncing up and down in excitement. You've figured out why it keeps exploding? Hermione ventured a guess. No, in the slightest, Luna replied cheerfully. I think I figured out a way that we can make our locomotive fly. Oh, Hermione pulled out her notebook. How? I thought we agreed that adapting the flight charms used on the motorcycle wouldn't work. Hermione frowned. Our tests all indicated that the locomotive will be a bit too heavy for them to work reliably. Did you think up some possible modification to get around that restriction? Yes, but I don't think those are powerful enough either, Luna said regretfully. So what if we ignored the flight charms altogether? Luna's smile deepened. Why do we need them? Our goal is to fly in the locomotive, not to make the locomotive fly. I don't see the floating tracks, Hermione ventured. We'll charm a bit the air to solidify and form into tracks in front of the train, Luna said quickly. That way we're not flying the train, we're just sort of levitating it and letting the train move itself forward, flying in the train without making the train fly. It might work, Hermione muttered, her mind conjuring up pictures of a locomotive shooting through the clouds. Still require an awful lot of power though. We can figure out the details and look into building a model later. Luna agreed. But first, I believe we have a test to perform. We have to blow up another motorbike, Hermione agreed. Well, hopefully not, but I don't hold out too much hope that we've gotten everything figured out yet. Yay, Luna squealed. It was long past lights out when Harry stumbled into the dorms, tripped over one of Dean's discarded shoes, and literally fell into his bed that night. Hooch say anything about me doing Quidditch with you? Ron asked. Madam Hooch says that if you want to learn to do Quidditch, then you'll have to come down and make your own broom, Harry mumbled, fighting to stay awake long enough to give a reply. Sorry mate. How much time do you have to spend with her every week? Ron asked speculatively. Couple hours, Harry mumbled. It all depends on what the other professors want to do and what I've messed up in class. Suppose it couldn't hurt to try it, Ron mused. What do you think? Harry. Ron turned to look at his friend, Harry, only to find that he was fast asleep. Luna squinted at her parchment for nearly 5 minutes before deciding to give up and get a second pair of eyes on the problem. Do you mind taking a look at this, Hermione? She asked. What's the problem, Luna? Hermione replied. My figures are off and I can't see where I'm making the mistake, Luna replied. I know my result can't be true. Hermione went over other girls' parchment 3 times before she was willing to admit defeat. I can't find your mistake either, Luna, She sighed. But you're right, this can't be correct. If it is, then, so it can't be, can it? But that would, huh? Mug of hot chocolate before hitting it again, Luna suggested. Perhaps a bit of time away will help us clear our minds. Sounds good to me, Luna. Hermione agreed absently, eyes locked on the parchment, mind running at full steam. McGonagall felt a deep sense of satisfaction when her prized research subject managed to duplicate his earlier error to produce several more of the odd creatures. Belatedly, she wondered if creating an entirely new species of magical mouse was a good idea for a few seconds before dismissing the matter. That was for history to decide. She was a professor of transfiguration and her student had given her an interesting transfiguration problem and it was her duty to research it until it could be reliably reproduced. Very good, Mr. Potter. Minerva looked down at the two-headed mouse-filled cage. Does that mean I can stop? Harry asked hopefully. It means that I can replicate your spell. And that you can take these mice down to Hagrid for your next lesson, Minerva replied, followed by an hour with Madame Hooch and another with Professor Sinistra. Yes, Professor, Harry said in defeat. Perhaps if he studied every lesson beforehand, he could avoid making any more mistakes, he wondered for the 100th time. Sure, it hadn't worked when he'd tried it before, but maybe if he tried it again but harder. Professor. Yes, Mr. Potter. These were transfigured from pillboxes. Why are they stable creatures? Because the pillboxes were transfigured mice, Mr. Potter. It's so methy. I do before class to make it easier for students to get the spell, Minerva replied. Not a word to anyone about that, understood? Part of our tricks to build student confidence is not letting students know any of the little tricks we use to help build student confidence. Yes, Professor. On your way. Harry picked up the cage and trudged through the castle and across the grounds to the groundskeeper's hut that served as Hagrid's home. 3 knocks on the door summoned the man in question, who looked more than a bit pleased to see both Harry and his cargo. "Hello, hurry," Hagrid said with a grin, "let's see the little darlings." Here they are, Hagrid." Harry handed the cage to the half-giant. "Wonderful looking things, aren't they?" One of the mice singed the edge of Hagrid's beard when he got too close. "Now, Professor, McGonagall tells me that they like to eat flies. You and I are going to find out what else the lovelies like to eat, then we're going to see if we can set up a breeding program fid. And Omake below. Omake by Dogbert Carroll." Minerva leaned on the sill and sipped her tea, watching her Gryffindors come thundering out of the castle to head down to Hogsmeade for the weekend. She noticed the way Hermione fussed over Harry's clothes and Ron's obvious indecision as to whether he should be amused at Harry's plight or jealous of the attention she was paying to the other boy. Young Ginny Weasley laughed a trifle loudly at something her current boyfriend said, obviously trying to stir some jealousy in the boy who lived in just as obviously annoying yet another young man who would break up with her shortly when he realized he wouldn't be able to hold her affections. "You can buy quality once or junk 100 times, the Transfiguration muttered, as she watched the future of the wizarding world escape all responsibilities and worries for the weekend. Omake by Shiro_Wolfman_K. What if he accidentally not only becomes an animagus, but actually find a way to not only choose what animal he becomes, but can in fact change said animal at will every time he transforms into one? Becoming the first Animorph, and nearly causing Minerva to foam in childish glee at Hogwarts in front of the students, or causing an scene like this. Hermione looked at Harry. "Okay, I give up, what's wrong with you?" Harry said, I think I offended McGonagall." "What did you do?" asked Hermione. "Nothing, Harry Potter, I became an animagi, and I could choose my animal." "Which one?" Hermione asked curiously. "A raven." "Okay. That's unusual, congratulations by the way. But there has to be more to it to anger McGonagall. When she asked me to do it again, and I complied, I turned myself into a cat." "What? Then a dog, owl, snake, tiger, cuckoo, koala, bear, an otter and a panda." Hermione sighed. Her friend has done it again. "So you think she's mad at you for that?" "Why do you think that?" Hermione paled. Harry, only you. That's no. I didn't need to have that in my mind." "What? Why? Tell me." "No, you were better not knowing. Now if you excuse me, I need to cuddle for a while on my bed trying to pretend you didn't tell me." That, Hermio. Harry. Great. Now she's mad at me too. Omake by lag. Harry trudged into the common room looking worn and dirty with several patches of his robes still smoldering. Okay mate. Ron asked then quick. Kaylee covered his nose as he got near enough to smell his best friend. Ya just some Muggle studies, Harry replied as he stumbled trying to get up the stairs. Muggle studies, Ron exclaimed as he rushed forward to steady his friend and help him up the stairs and hopefully to the showers before he had to take another breath. Yeah, the professor had this chart with numbers he wanted me to try and conjure. Ron was scratching his head while vanishing Harry cloths, then pushing him under a shower stall and turning the water on. Conjure numbers. That's daft. I know, but he was really happy when he RTED speaking in really high voice on the second try, and then things got really weird. Harry just stared off into space while wondering why on earth he just couldn't get past 78. Omake by some guy Fox. It's a Sterling engine. Ellipsis. Who knows what we can come up with using solid Muggle theory and magical tools. Well, congratulations girls. I believe that's the first diaphragm style Sterling engine in history to explode. And look at the size of that crater. The death of one dream, the birth of Anyo. Ron considered his options as he ate his evening meal. On the one hand, real professional trainin'. G would be invaluable if he wanted to get into the pros, could even shave a year or two off his time in the second string. On the other hand, Hooch expected him to do a lot of bloody useless work carving brooms before she'd let him do any flying. Ron sighed, he really had no choice in the matter. The opportunity was just too good to miss. The boy gathered up his things and walked down to the Quidditch pitch to meet his friend. Telling himself that a bit of useless hard work would pay off when he made it to the league, and imagining the laughter he'd get when he told the story during a speech accepting an MVP award in the not-so-distant future. A grin blossomed on Harry's face when he saw Ron approach. Truth be told, he was starting to feel a bit lonely since he begun spending the majority of his time with the professors, and since Hermione's obsession with mixing technology and magic had precluded her from attending more than the occasional extra class with him. Decided to come along then? Hooch asked mildly, mentally evaluating the boy and wondering if she'd have to bar him from her supplemental lessons based on what she'd heard of his attitude. Bit of extra work is worth it to get into the pros early. Ron replied seriously. Let's get the boring part out of the way first. Boring part? She raised an eyebrow, a gesture both boys would later regard as one of the most terrifying things they'd ever seen. The bloody carving, Ron explained. Harry said you wouldn't let me fly without doing that. I see. An evil grin bloomed on the instructor's face. She'd intended to put them through a couple simple drills. But the little Weasley had inspired her to new levels of sadism. Little Snot thought flying was the fun part. Well, let's just see how much he enjoyed flying aft. One of the Harpies. Lost game, workouts. Darn it, Harry cursed. Harry sometimes wondered why Ron had to be so thick. I think you're correct, Mr. Weasley. It would be best get the boring part out of the way first. Hooch said with a horrific grin. Don't you think so, Harry? Yes, Professor, Harry sighed. He really hated his life sometimes. In fact, I'm suddenly not feeling well. Could I be excused from today's flying? I think I might have. He frantically tried to think of something. Stress-related ulcers. A quick run around the field is just the thing to occupy your mind, she said firmly. That should clear the stress right out of you, shouldn't it, Mr. Potter? Her tone brooked no argument. Understood, Professor, Harry said glumly. Darn it, why did his friend have to be so bloody thick? May I just state for the record that I find carving to be quite relaxing and not at all boring, and would be quite happy to skip today's flying in favor of more carving. I'll take that under consideration, Hooch said calmly. Maybe we start off with something my old coach used to run us through after she had a particularly rough night of drinking the night before we had an early practice, and then move on to the things she used to put us through when she was in a bad mood, shall we? But I'm getting ahead of myself. We decided we were going to get the boring part out of the way first, didn't we? Which should give me plenty of time to think about just what today's session should include. Sounds good, Professor, Ron said cheerfully, apparently unaware of just how deeply he'd stepped into it. I can't wait to see what real professional training is like. Hermione and Luna looked down at the motorbike with twin looks of accomplishment. It hadn't been easy, but Aid managed to assemble a complete bike from the jumble of parts that Remus had delivered. "Do you think Harry will be pleased?" Luna asked eagerly. "I'm sure he will be," Hermione agreed. "I already told you that." "I know," Luna agreed. "It's just. It's okay. Calm down, Luna." Hermione put an arm on the younger girl's shoulder. "I've never had friends before and I'm not sure how to act," Luna confessed. "I'm worried I'll make some horrible mistake." "I understand," Hermione assured the nervous girl. "I didn't have any friends before I got to Hogwarts either." Ron glanced over as Harry leapt to his feet and presented something to Professor Hooch. Looked like the wand Harry had spent most of his time working on. With a sigh and only a clenched jaw to betray his sense of frustration, Ron turned back to his work. "Which one is that?" Hooch asked as Harry proudly held up his mostly completed wand. "Owl feather core," with air replied. The professor watched as Harry gave the newly constructed wand an experimental wave, and for a second, the world seemed to turn inside out, and Hooch would have sworn that she could see the odor of freshly cut wood, taste the sound the wand made as it cut through the air, and hear the light bouncing off the Weasley boy's hair. "What in the bloody heck was that?" Ron asked between dry heaves. It was by far simultaneously the worst, most boring, not too bad, and most interesting experience of his young life. He doubted the words needed to describe it existed in anyone's vocabulary save possibly Luna Lovegood's, and there was no chance of him asking Harry to try to repeat the experience for the girl in order to find out. All he wanted to do was forget the unforgettable and unsee the unseeable, something that should be doable with just a bit of hard work, he figured. That was a particularly strong reaction to a wand choosing a wizard. The flight instructor choked, hitting her mouth with a breath-freshening charm to remove the taste of vomit. She had clearly not been any better prepared for the experience than Ron had been. "Is that bad?" Harry asked nervously. "Not as such," Hooch said dryly. "It does mean that my uncle is going to hound you until he figures out what happened, though." "Another class?" Harry asked sickly. "I wouldn't worry about it till you get out for summer," she replied. The world had finally stopped spinning and she was beginning to see color again. "He's going to be spending most of his time collecting raw materials and constructing wands until early July, though he might persuade himself to make a short side trip after," she described what she'd just seen. "Oh," Harry sighed in relief. "Dodged that bullet. Well, put it off for a bit anyway." "Now let's see yours," Hooch said to Ron. She held out her hand. I'm not quite as far along as Harry is," Ron demurred. "He started yesterday." "Let's see what you've got so far," she ordered. "All right," Ron agreed. He handed her the wand he'd been carving. "Did you do this freehand?" she asked as she examined the half-done wand. "Couldn't figure out how to get the details right with the lathe," Ron admitted. "Well," he told himself, "if it's that bad then maybe she'll just let me skip all this wood carving stuff and go straight to flying, hopefully without the sadism." "You ever carve anything before this?" "Da taught us how to make our own toys when I was a kid," Ron admitted. "I used to make dolls for my sister. Well, parts of dolls mum would make the clothes and the body. Used to make other things for around the house too. Haven't done it so much since I came to Hogwarts. Just a couple sets of chessmen out of pine as practice for when he got skilled enough to transfigure wood to stone, and his best effort at a guardian gargoyle for his trunk." She turned the half-finished blank over in her hands. "Why'd you carve this indent into the handle?" she demanded. "That's so I have a place to rest my thumb," Ron replied. "Doesn't feel very comfortable to me," she commented. "Your thumb is smaller than mine," Ron replied patiently, trying to hide his annoyance at having to explain something he thought was perfectly obvious. "I'd have done it different if I were carving it for you." She pursed her lips and handed the wand back. "Let's get back to flying." "Right," Harry agreed as he reached for his firebolt. "School brooms for both of you," she said sharply. "Yes, Professor," Harry agreed with considerably less enthusiasm. Why couldn't she be content to prove her point to Ron and leave him out of it? The next 2 hours were grueling. Harry would have laughed if he had enough energy. He'd thought wood was bad. Hooch had taught him that there were levels that Wood had never dreamed of. 3 more passes, Hooch ordered. "You have enough energy to smile. You have enough energy to keep going." "Yes," Professor, Harry agreed weakly. Lesson learned, he was never going to smile again. Weasley, Hooch bellowed. What in the heck do you think you're doing? Cover that bloody goal post. Yes, Professor, Ron agreed. To think, he'd once thought that Quidditch was fun. That's enough, she bellowed after a few more minutes. On the ground, both of you. How'd we do? Ron asked hopefully. Gather your things, Hooch said, ignoring Ron's question. Harry, I want you to take some sandpaper with you to finish up your wand during the holidays. I doubt we're going to have time to do it while you're still at Hogwarts. I want you to get progressively smoother. Until you get to the race skin, buff it after that and rub beeswax into it. Yes, Professor, Harry agreed. Ron, stay behind a bit. I have something I need to talk to you about. Yes, Professor, Ron agreed with a sigh. He'd thought he had skills until he had a chance to play against Harry. Even on a school broom and in an unfamiliar position, Harry was still able to fly rings around him. Wasn't it enough that Harry was the greatest seeker Gryffindor had seen in God knows how long? Bloody Pratt had to be a decent chaser too. Bloody unfair. Wait for him outside, Mr. Potter, Hooch ordered. She sighed at the look on his face. Outside, Harry, she repeated. Yes, Professor. Harry shot his friend a look of sympathy as he walked out of the professor's office. What do you want, Professor? Ron asked in a defeated tone of voice. He steeled himself for what he knew was coming. Kid, I've got good and bad news for you, Hooch said seriously. The bad is that you're never going pro, just don't have the reflexes. I'm sorry I had to be the one to break it to you, I really am. But better to find out now than to keep hoping till one of the League Scouts tells you in a couple years. Least this way you're not counting on a career that'll never come. B-U-T-I. Ron felt like his whole world had collapsed. This was even worse than what he'd expected. The good is that your carving is top-notch, she continued, ignoring the tears forming in the corners of the boy's eyes. Not pro level, but I think that the potential is there. If you're willing to devote the time and effort, then someday people are going to be talking about your brooms in the same breath they used to talk about Firebolt and Nimbus. Really? Ron looked like a drowning man that had just caught a life preserver. A bit of color returned to his cheeks. You're not joking. Are you? I never joke about brooms, she said seriously. Would it be all right to talk with you about this some more? Ron asked hopefully. When? Tonight if possible, Ron said quickly. I'd like to be able to work on carving during holidays, Professor. Hooch pursed her lips. Potter, she called out. Yes, Professor. Harry stuck his head back in the woman's office. He caught a glimpse of R.O.'s smiling face out of the corner of his eye. Maybe Hooch had seen something in Ron's flying that he hadn't. Your friend will be a while. Head back to the castle. She had a couple weeks to try to drill the basics into the boy's thick skull. Time to see if he had the follow-through. Yes, Professor, Harry agreed reluctantly. Hooch waited until the boy was out of sight before returning her attention to the youngest male Weasley. One question before we begin. Yes, Professor. Why did you call carving the boring part, if you're already so bloody good at it? Harry's never done it before, Professor, Ron said reasonably. I didn't want to have to sit through a bunch of beginner stuff. Plus I never thought it would be useful for anything aside from making toys and chessmen and stuff like that. I see. Which neatly laid every one of her possible reservations to rest. All right, Mr. Weasley. The first thing I need you to demonstrate is. The last Potter was deep in thought as he made his way back to the castle to steal a quick shower before his next research session. Harry, Luna called out. The two girls ambushed their messy-haired friend just before he got to the main entrance. What is it? He asked. We've got something to show you, Luna said breathlessly. Right, Hermione agreed. What is it? Harry asked. It's a surprise, Hermione said. Right, Luna. Right, Luna agreed. She was practically bouncing up and down in excitement. It's a good one, I promise, the girl added. Okay, lead the way. The two girls each took possession of one of his arms and dragged H.I.M. down an unfamiliar path and into the enormous shed that housed the Hogwarts Express. It's over here, Luna said as she dragged him past one of the massive engines. The girl flung open the door to Reveal a beat-up motorbike sitting in the middle of a large empty room. There wasn't much Harry could tell about it based on his limited to almost non-existent knowledge of motorcycles, just that it seemed to have been well used and bore a strong resemblance to one of his earliest memories and several of his fondest dreams. Harry took several stumbling steps until he was within touching distance of the machine. As this, Harry stared down at the motorcycle with an unreadable look on his face, his hand dropping to caress the fuel tank. "It's not the one he made for himself," Hermione said softly. She was beginning to get nervous over Harry's lack of reaction. "It's one of the ones he took apart, so see how they worked. Remus found it and that is to say Luna and I put it together." "But it was his, yes." Harry took a couple steps forward and ran his hand over the tank, letting his fingers find every dent and ding. "Yes," Hermione agreed. "Thank you," Harry whispered. "I used to have dreams about his motorbike, you know." He continued softly. "I always wanted one of my own, used to fantasize about it taking me away from the Dursleys forever." "And now you have one," Luna said quickly. "Does that make you happy?" She bit her lower lip as she waited for his reply. "More than you'll ever know. Much more than I can ever express with mere words," Harry agreed hoarsely. "Thank you." "You said that, Harry," Hermione teased. "So I did, and so I likely will again," Harry agreed. His hand reached out to caress the fuel tank again. "Does it run?" "We haven't gotten to that stage yet," Hermione demurred. Why in the heck hadn't they thought of that? She locked eyes with Luna, who nodded by way of reply. "We wanted to show you right away," Luna added. "We thought it best to not delay the time it would take to get it running again." "It's wonderful," Harry said slowly. "Wonderful." He gave one last regretful caress before turning away. "I have to get to my extra classes. You can always come back to it later," Hermione assured her friend. "It's not going anywhere, so you can come down to see it whenever you have a moment to spare." With a last smile for each of the girls and a last look at the motorcycle, Harry turned and walked out of the room. "I'm glad we were able to do that for him. He really seemed to enjoy it, didn't he?" Hermione said with a wide smile. "Hermione," Luna said suddenly. "Yeah, Luna. If seeing one motorcycle assembled made Harry happy, how happy do you think he will be after we assemble all of them?" She trailed off when she noticed the look of hopeful expectation in the blonde's eyes. "Why don't we find out, Luna?" The little blonde's smile nearly split her face upon hearing her friend's reply. "I was hoping you would say that, Hermione." Harry pulled himself out of bed the next morning and met Ron and Hermione in the common room. The three of them stared dully at each other for several seconds, until Harry decided to break the silence. "Why do you two look so tired this morning?" Harry asked his friends. After all, he was the only one being tortured by the professors. "I was up all night doing something with Luna," Hermione replied with a yawn. "I spent most of the night working on my carving after I finished another talk with Hooch," Ron replied. "Breakfast," Hermione suggested. "Let's go," Harry agreed. "Can't wait," Ron pitched in. The Golden Trio walked into the Great Hall, past the other house tables, and towards their house table for their morning meal. "Save me 2 seats," Hermione requested as she broke off Fr. Her friends and started walking towards a blonde mop taking a seat towards the isolated end of the Ravenclaw table reserved for loners and those that were otherwise excluded socially from the house. "Luna, over here," Hermione called out, getting her friend's attention. The blonde cheerfully bounced over to her friend's side. "Yes." "Hermione, how can you look so awake?" Hermione demanded. "OT almost 4 whole hours of sleep in a solid block last night, Hermione. Why wouldn't I look awake?" Luna asked happily. "I wanted to get all my packing done before my roommates woke up," Luna explained. "What is it you wanted, Hermione?" Quote, would you like to have breakfast with us today, Luna?" "I would be delighted to, thank you, Hermione. After that, the 4 of us can take the carriages to the Hogwarts Express together." Hermione continued. "I'm sorry, Hermione. But I was hoping to get down to help them warm up the engine," Luna said regretfully. "But I would love to sit with you on the train if that's all right with you. I should be by shortly after the train leaves the station if that is acceptable." Hermione noticed the way her friend stiffened up while waiting for the reply. "Of course, Luna. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go with you to help with the engine." I'll wait for you to finish packing, Luna agreed. I got all that done 2 days ago, Hermione said quickly. Just let me arrange for my trunk to get brought down and I'll join you in a minute. Aren't we going to have breakfast first? Luna asked innocently. Oh, right. Hermione blushed. I forgot all about that. The two girls walked over to the Gryffindor tables and took their places next to Harry and Ron on the bench. Morning, Luna, Harry greeted the girl. Good morning, Harry, Luna replied with a dazzling smile. Mumph, Lana. Ron said with a wave. Good morning, Ronald, Luna said. It was so nice to be accepted. Thank you for saving us a couple of seats, Harry, Hermione said. Anything for a friend, Harry replied. Hey, Lav. Do you mind doing me a favor? Hermione asked her roommate across the table to her dorm mate. What is it? Lavender replied. Could you bring Crookshanks and my trunk down to the common room? Please, Hermione asked. Luna and I are going to go help the express crew with the engine. Sure, no problem, Lavender agreed. Anything else? That's all, thank you, Lavender. Happy to help, Harry. Hermione turned to the boy on her left with a hopeful look on her face. If you don't mind, I have a favor to ask you. Yeah, I can get it all on the train for you. Thank you, Harry. What are friends for? If it's not too much trouble, could you find a compartment at the front of the train? Luna asked nervously, surprising herself with how bold she'd gotten in the short time since her friendship with Hermione had bloomed. As far forward as possible anyway. Sure, why? Hermione and I are going to be in the engine compartment when the train pulls up to the station and it would be nice to have a short walk, Luna explained. Ah, okay, Luna. Thank you, Harry, Luna said sweetly. Ah, Mr. Potter. McGonagall's voice caused the students to jump. Just the person I wanted to see on this fine morning. Yes, Professor. I was just musing the other day about how it's a shame that you can't practice magic while you're away from the castle, McGonagall began. Severely limits the amount of practical assignments I can give you to complete anyway. Yes, Professor, Harry agreed neutrally. A chill went down his spine as he waited for the other shoe to drop. Happily, I have a solution. I'm going to be permitted to use magic. Harry asked hopefully. Granted, he had his newly constructed wand that Madame Hooch had forgotten to charm. It would still be nice to be able to do things legally. I'm afraid not, Minerva replied. This way, please. See you on the train, Harry said over his shoulder as he followed his head of house out of the Great Hall. McGonagall led Harry back to her office rectangular wand-shaped box. Here you are, Mr. Potter. What's this, Professor? It's a weighted training wand, Minerva explained. Phileas tells me that professional duelists use them to practice wand movements. He opened the box to find a metal object about the same size and shape of his normal wand but noticeably heavier. It's heavy, according to Phileas, so that the weight helps one train for a normal duel, Minerva continued. The tip will light up when you make a successful movement. Nothing will happen if you make an unsuccessful movement. Thanks, Professor. You are very welcome, Mr. Potter. Hermione and Luna walked in to find the train shed a hive of activity. The fireman was throwing shovels full of coal through the hatch to keep the steam up while engineer checked and double-checked every gauge to ensure that everything was correct. Beside them the crew on the backup engine replicated every one of their actions. On the train itself the crew made their last checks as they got ready for their run to London. Dinna expect to see you girls ere today, one of the firemen said loudly, giving the two a half-toothless grin. All activity halted as the men noticed the two girls. Woulda you'd be with her mates. We are, Luna replied. Right, Hermione. And, W are happy ta, avenue it, the fireman replied with a grin. Why don't you start inspection? It'd be a big ELP. Granted the express had already been inspected and re-inspected, but it wouldn't hurt anything to do it again and it would keep the two girls from getting underfoot. Right, Hermione agreed. Come on, Luna. The two girls spent the next few minutes going over every inch of the massive machine, checking and rechecking very critical part to ensure that there would be no problems on the run to London. The Hogwarts Express had an unmatched reputation for reliability and the girls promised themselves that they would not miss the slightest thing which might mar that reputation. All finished then, The engineer asked. Neither of us found any critical problems, Hermione reported. But you might want to have a close look at the steam gauge siphoning pipe. Quote, we couldn't find anything wrong, but there's something off about it, Luna added. Good job, he said. He tossed each of the girls a bundle of clothing. All. Take a look at it while you change into these coveralls and stow your good clothes, he advised. Gonna get real dirty in a few minutes. Right, Hermione agreed. The two girls retired to the Privac Y of the office to change into their new outfits. Hermione's father sighed in frustration as he put down the phone. Of all the bloody times for something to come up, a part of him wished his wife wasn't such a soft touch. The rest of him realized that she wouldn't be the woman he'd fallen in love with if she wasn't. Thomas, he called out. Yes, sir, the driver replied. I'm afraid that we will not be able to pick up Hermione ourselves, Philip said with a look of distaste. His fists balled up in frustration. Please tell her that her mother has an emergency surgery and that we will see her when she gets home. Both of you, sir. Quote, Phil snorted. They want to ensure that everyone in the room has the proper clearances in case the idiot spills something while under, and they say that no one else with the proper skills and clearances is available. I suspect the bastard doesn't want someone of the wrong class in the room, and he's willing to overlook my lack of title due to my net worth and the fact that I attended Eton. I see, sir. Remind me to pad the bill quite a bit more than normal, enough to make it hurt, and to do something particularly nasty in response to this newest bit of stupidity if my suspicions should prove to be founded. An unpleasant thought formed. It was just likely someone thought they were important and wanted to show off just how important they were by forcing his wife to attend and him to be present. If that were the case, then Phil would need to make an example that would ensure that such behavior would not repeat itself. Very good, sir. Should I take Ms. Hermione and her young gentleman to get something to eat on the way here? Take her wherever she likes if she asks. I'd like to have a meal with her, but not if it means she goes without if she's hungry. Yes, sir. Thank you, Thomas. That will be all. Yes, sir. Hermione and Luna watched in fascination as the crew of the Hogwarts Express went about their task of running the engine. Nothing exciting from here on, the engineer said loudly. He smiled down at the two soot-covered girls. Why don't you two clean up a bit and then go see your friends? Come on, Hermione said as she dragged the younger girl into the washroom. Let's get some of this soot off. All right, Hermione. Several thorough cleaning charms and a bit of soap and water made them presentable enough for polite company, and they stepped out of the small crew rest area and across the gap into the first passenger car in search of their friends. Thomas went over the necessary changes with the rest of the staff as they prepared to pick up their employer's daughter from the train station. No changes for the first half, he said in a slow, measured tone. I want the first group to be in place and keeping an eye out for trouble 4 hours before the train comes in. The snack cart lady was preparing to make her rounds when she saw the normally closed door at the head of the car open to admit the two girls. Looking for your friends? She asked. Yes, Hermione agreed. Do you know where they are? I do indeed, lass. The conductor put them in the second compartment of the first car just behind the prefects, the woman said helpfully. This car, that is. Thank you very much, Hermione said quickly. Come on, Luna. It didn't take long for the two girls to join their friends, but after about 15 minutes of socializing, the lack of sleep began to catch up with them. Harry and Hermione were both sound asleep and leaning on each other for support, and Ron was looking down longingly. Would you like to lay down on the bench, Ronald? Luna asked. Yeah, Ron agreed gratefully. But where will you go? I shall sit next to Hermione, Luna replied. She walked to the other side of the car, took a seat, and laid her head on the other girl's shoulder. Have a pleasant sleep, Ronald. Night, Luna. The four of them slept quietly through the next 100 miles or so until they were discovered by two of Gryffindor's biggest gossips. Fetch Colin, Lavender whispered. Or at the very least, fetch his camera. Right, Parvati agreed. Lavender stifled a giggle as she watched her roommate drool on the boy who lived, while the blonde Ravenclaw drooled on her. Oh, they were going to tease Hermione so much. Got it, Parvati whispered. Rather, got him. Good work, Lavender whispered back. Colin, do your stuff. Right. Colin agreed. To the dismay of the two gossips, the flashes woke their sleeping classmates before more than a couple pictures could be taken. I suggest we leave, Laven. Dur said as she darted out of the compartment. Quickly, Parvati giggled. What was that? Harry asked with a yawn. A pair of loud-mouthed, nosy, gossiping twits, Hermione replied with a sniff. Did you get a good rest, Harry? Yeah, Harry agreed. How about you, Luna? Marvelous. How was yours, Ronald? Wish it was longer, but I got work to do, Hermione. I really should revise my homework schedule, Hermione mused. Hermione glanced at Harry and Luna out of the corner of her eye. But I can always do that later, she said firmly. Care for a game to pass the time? Sure, Harry agreed. I'd love to, Luna said happily. You guys go ahead, Ron sighed. I really do need to take care of this. Ron pulled out what looked like 12 inches of cut-off broomstick out of his bag, along with a carving knife and a bit of sandpaper. Plenty of time for you to join us later, mate, Harry said quickly. Ron broke the silence a few minutes later. Hey, Hermione, could you hold this and tell me how it feels? He asked Hope Girl the twisted and oddly carved foot-long length of broomstick. Sure, Ron, Hermione agreed. She awkwardly took the stick away from him. It feels weird. You're holding it wrong, Ron said patiently. How should I hold it then? Hermione asked with a huff. Follow the twist with your thumb, Ron advised. Ah, Hermione said happily. That's much better. What are you trying to do, Ronald? Luna asked. Trying to make a custom grip sample to send to the Harpies, Ron explained. Could you try it now, Luna? Of course, Ronald. I'd be happy to help, Luna agreed. She held the grip expertly for a few seconds. A bit large for me, but comfortable. Thanks, Luna. What do you mean, send it to the Harpies? Hermione asked. Madam Hooch is using her connections to get it looked at. Ron explained. She says that there's big money in doing aftermarket customizations of factory brooms and that most of the players like to have their broomsticks fitted. Isn't there a lot of competition? Hermione asked with a worried frown. Not as much as you'd think, Ron said cheerfully. Most of the companies hate to bother with this sort of thing. Takes a lot of time and they figure the real money is in selling the mass-produced stuff to the public. Quidditch players are just there to advertise. And where there's a market for something and a lack of competition, there's money to be made. Hermione agreed. Let me take a look at your business plan later, okay, Ron. Business plan. Dad taught me a little about them, Hermione explained. She nor. Mally hated to have anything to do with it, but was willing to dirty her hands to help a friend. Said it was something every Granger had to understand, even if it cut into her reading time. I'll help you write one up later, okay. Thanks, Hermione. The children shucked their robes as the train pulled into the station. Don't forget to charm them to be lighter before we get off the train, Hermione advised. She pulled out her wand and hit her trunk with a couple of spells. Would you mind too much doing mine as well, Hermione? Luna asked with a faint blush. I'm not very proficient with that charm yet. Of course, Luna. Hermione cast a couple more charms. I'm always happy to help. They stepped off the train and Harry suddenly found himself enveloped by a pair of arms. Harry dear, Mrs. Weasley said happily. Hello, Mrs. Weasley. Hermione. Molly released her captive and grabbed another. I hear you're planning to stay together this holiday. My parents wanted a chance to meet him, Hermione explained. Luna's coming over later too, she added. Well, just be sure that you don't do anything scandalous, Molly advised sternly. Yes, Mrs. Weasley. Yes, Mrs. Weasley. The two red-faced teens agreed. Leave them alone, Molly, Arthur said gently. Unless you want me to tell the story of the second-floor classroom. Sorry that had to happen to you guys, Ron whispered to his friends. But now you know what I have to live with. Mum says that embarrassing your children is one of the major benefits of being a parent, Hermione sighed. Guess that's one thing that's the same in both worlds. Arthur finished his conversation with his wife and turned back to the two children. Are you two going to be all right? It's no trouble to wait with you until your parents get here. They should be waiting on the other side of the barrier, Mr. Weasley, Hermione said. I can call them and wait in the station office if they're not there. If you're sure, Arthur said slowly. It'll be fine, Mr. Weasley. Harry assured the man. Hermione and I both grew up in the Muggle world. Well, if anything happens or your parents aren't there, I want the two of you to me back to the platform and flow me immediately. We will, Mr. Weasley, Hermione agreed quickly. All right. He sighed. Just remember that, you know who, is back and. We understand, Mr. Weasley, Harry said quickly. We'll be careful. Hermione and Harry said their goodbyes to their friends and walked through the barrier to the proper side of King's Cross. Thomas, Hermione squealed. She ran to an imposing man with close cropped gray hair and threw her arms around him. Did you miss me? We all did, Ms. Hermione. Harry, this is my mother's driver, Thomas. Pleased to meet you, sir, Harry said politely. Thomas. This is my friend, Harry Potter. The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Harry. Where are Mum and Dad? Hermione asked. Your parents had to do an emergency surgery, the gray-haired driver explained. They'll meet you at Matchingham Hall. Just leave your trunk here, Harry, Hermione said to her friend. Someone in the other car will take care of it. Other car? Harry asked dumbly. One for people, the other for the trunks, Hermione agreed. Actually, there were two other cars, one for chase and the other to lead, but security was never something that Hermione ever concerned herself with or even noticed the majority of the time. Hermione grabbed Harry by the wrist and dragged him out of the station without a further thought to their luggage. Where's the car, Thomas? It's the S-Class, Ms. Hermione. The burly driver replied. Daddy bought another car? Hermione asked. Yes, Ms. Hermione. The driver opened the back door for his charges and helped them into the back seat of the roomy sedan. Hermione, Harry whispered as the car pulled away from the curb. She shot him an odd look. What is it? Hermione whispered back. Is he a wizard? Harry whispered. He fingered his wand. I don't think so, Hermione replied. Why? 'Cause he's got something hidden up his sleeve, Harry replied in a low dangerous voice. Hermione was surprised to see her best friend's wand appear in his hand as he focused on a point at the base of the driver's neck. How sure are you that he hasn't been replaced? Thomas, Hermione called out. Yes, Ms. Hermione. What do you have hidden up your sleeve? You noticed that? He asked with a grin. He stopped the car and pulled up his sleeve to reveal a wicked-looking double-edged dagger strapped to his forearm. Like to keep it on hand to open letters and such for your dad? Thank you, Thomas. Not at all, Ms. Hermione. Satisfied, Hermione whispered. Yeah, Harry agreed sheepishly. I just noticed that he had something that looked like a wand and I started thinking about Polyjuice and, well, I understand. She patted him on the leg. It must be terrible for you, what with, you know who, back. Home is where you keep your books. Home is where you keep your books. Harry's wide unblinking eyes were fixed out the window as the large car pulled through a massive wrought iron gate onto a crushed stone driveway towards the sort of manor house he'd only gotten peeks at on the period dramas his Aunt Petunia enjoyed. He hadn't thought people still lived in places like the massive multi-story, heck, he hadn't thought the country had many of them since they'd seemed more like relics of a bygone era. That's where you live, Harry murmured in shock, half expecting her to laugh and to tell him that she'd decided to make a brief stop for an educational tour of some historic notables' home on the way to her much more modest abode. On weekends and holidays, Hermione agreed. We're usually at the London house during the week. Why? Is there something wrong with it? It's huge, Harry replied. You never said your house was so big. It isn't, Hermione corrected him with an annoyed huff. My house is in London and it isn't nearly so large. Then what do you call that thing? I told you, Hermione said in exasperation. It's the weekend house. It's where we stay on weekends and holidays, Harry. Pay attention, she admonished. Oh, Harry said faintly. The boy felt like he was in a daze as he followed his best friend out of the car and towards the front entrance. I really don't see what the big deal is anyway, Hermione continued. It isn't even half the size of Hogwarts. Bit more than a third, Harry agreed, mumbled back. He didn't think it would be productive to point out the fact that Hogwarts an entire staff and student body, while her weekend house kept only one family. Hermione was able to contain herself until they came to a stop at the front entrance. Thomas, did they transfer my library? Of course, Ms. Hermione. The burly driver agreed. You don't think we'd be cruel enough to keep your books from you? Sorry, Thomas, Hermione said contritely. She captured Harry's wrist in an unbreakable grip. Come on. I want to show you my books. The large driver smiled as the girl he thought of as a daughter dragged her victim into the house. It was good to have her back, even if only for a few weeks. Luna waited patiently until they got home before she asked her father where their search for elusive creatures would take them that year. The answer her father gave shocked her to the very core of her being. The back garden, of course, the man replied proudly. Why not some mysterious and distant land? Luna asked with a frown. Because that's where we'd expect them to be. Her father gave a knowing wink. They're 11 steps ahead of us, so we've got to be on a 12-step program, Luna cheered. You're brilliant, father. I have my moments, he said modestly. This will also let you spend more time with your friends, he added. Oh, Luna cocked her head. How so? We can't spend all our time searching, he said with another knowing wink. We've got to set song aside to lull them into a false sense of security. Of course, Luna agreed. It makes so much sense. That it does. He winked again. But first, there's something we need to do, Luna said firmly. What's that? We need to get you to a healer, Luna replied seriously. There's something wrong with your eye. She gave him a look full of reproach. You haven't been taking care of yourself without me around to watch you. Hermione dragged Harry into a large room filled with books and shoved him into a large comfy-looking chair before disappearing into the stacks. She returned a few moments later with a lithe brown-haired woman in a modest dress and very intense eyes. Harry, this is Ms. Jane, the librarian, Hermione said respectfully. She was my governess before I went to Hogwarts. A pleasure to meet you, the woman said kindly. The pleasure is all mine, Harry replied gallantly. Something about the woman put him on guard. He wasn't sure why, but it was a feeling he'd gotten Fr. All the servants in the Granger household. Any friend of Hermione's is a friend of mine. Ms. Jane, this is my friend Harry Potter. Hermione beamed up at the woman. He's the one I told you about. Yes, the woman said thoughtfully. I believe there were references to him in a couple of the new books. Which ones? Hermione asked excitedly. They're on my desk, the librarian said with a fond smile. I'll be right back. Hermione announced before darting off. Harry. Yes, Ms. Jane. Hermione is very special to me. The woman looked down at him. If you let anything happen to her, I will kill you. The woman announced calmly. Harry couldn't help himself. He burst into laughter. The woman raised an eyebrow. You think I'm joking? No, I do not. Harry wiped the tears off his face. I think the two of us are going to get along very well. A look of confusion appeared on the woman's face. Her mouth snapped shut when she heard the sound of returning footsteps. You didn't tell me there were so many, Hermione said as she walked up. She frowned when she noticed the looks on their faces. Did something happen? We were just surprised to find out how much we had in common, Harry explained to his friend. I think Ms. Jane and I are going to be very good friends. It's so rare to find someone who can understand you so well, Ms. Jane agreed. As Mr. Potter said, we have quite a bit in common. I knew you two would get along, Hermione said in relief. A smile bloomed on the girl's face at the thought of two of her favorite people getting along. Was there anything else you needed, Hermione? The librarian asked Hermione with her newly returned genuine smile. No thank you, Hermione said politely. Then I shall leave you to your reading. She gave Harry an appraising nod. Mr. Potter. Ms. Jane. Harry's eyes tracked the woman until she was out of sight. Thank you. He took the book from his friend. Is there another chair in here? We can both fit on this one, Hermione replied, flopping onto the chair beside him. Phil Granger was waiting outside the changing room when his wife stepped out. He could tell by the look on her face that it was going to be one of those fun conversations. Problem? He asked gently. Why don't we wait until we get into the car before we discuss it? She suggested. For that matter, why don't we get to the car right now? I can change into real clothes after we get home. If you like, he agreed. He nodded to someone further down the hall. James should have the car waiting for us outside. Thank you, she sighed. He waited until they were safely in the car before he breached the subject again. So what's got you so tense? Bloody fool, she growled. I've told him for years that he needed to do some major work, but no, he was too busy. And then now, on the day I was supposed to meet our daughter at the station, the idiot breaks something and absolutely has to get it fixed right away. Should have made him wait, Phil murmured. I would have if I'd known what it looked like beforehand, she sighed. Bloody fool made it sound like he was dying. Then he'll have no complaints when he sees how large the bill is. Phil had already decided to make the man pay, both officially and unofficially. Emergencies are expensive and dentists with the proper clearances are hard to come by. Doubly so if they had to be socially acceptable, too. Especially when my presence is demanded as well and not needed. That was me, Anne admitted. I wasn't sure if I would need some trustworthy help or not and why. Oh, you wouldn't believe who they tried to saddle me with the last time. I see. Anne moved across the seat to snuggle up with her husband, Philistine. He raised the privacy screen. High-bred fop. Ha. RRY and Hermione were deeply engrossed in their books when the sound of someone clearing their throat caught their attention. Your parents have called and they are on their way, a man in a distinguished-looking suit announced. You may wish to take the opportunity to freshen up before dinner. Right, Hermione agreed. Come on, Harry. Perhaps Mr. Potter would like to freshen up in his own quarters, the butler suggested delicately. Thanks, Harry said gratefully. Where are they? I'll have someone show you to your room, the butler offered. I can show him, Hermione volunteered, seizing the boy by the wrist and dragging him in her wake. This way, Harry. Luna cautiously stalked her prey. Slowly, carefully, she moved closer and closer until she was close enough to make her final lunge. She waited a heartbeat for the right moment. 2 heartbeats. With a cry of triumph, she leapt to her feet and held her prize aloft. Look what I found. Father, Luna called out. The man hurried over. What is it? It appears to be a frog, Luna replied with a wide, smug smile. I must admit that it had me fooled at first. But not now, he agreed. Nope, not since I had a flash of brilliant inspiration. Of course, it all makes so much sense now. If they're willing to trick us by hiding near our home, it stands to reason that they'll try to trick us by pretending to be ordinary creatures, Luna finished. She glared down at the frog. And to think, you almost got away with it. Croak, the confused frog replied. Luna grinned. Ha, no use playing innocent, mister. You aren't gonna fool me now that I know the truth. A bead of sweat worked its way down the frog's brow. Croak. Hermione allowed nearly Harry 5 minutes of peace to settle in before she started pounding on his door and demanding that he open it. Hurry up, Harry, she called through the door. My parents will be here any minute now and I want you to meet them. Just a back. He pulled his pants on and opened the door. Well. Hermione gave him a critical once-over, noting every little thing he'd gotten wrong. Where's your tie? She demanded. I need a tie. I want you to make a good impression, Hermione said firmly. So you need a tie. She brushed past him and began rummaging through his trunk. Go right ahead, Harry muttered. No, I don't mind. Feel free to look through my trunk, what's mine is yours. Hermione showed no sign that she'd heard a word he said. After a few seconds of rummaging, she pulled a scarlet tie out of the trunk with a look of triumph on her face. Did you say something, Harry? Nothing you'd like to hear, Harry replied cheerfully. Okay. Hermione looked around for a moment. Sit on the bed, she ordered. Sometimes, it wasn't easy being Harry Potter. It's a good thing that Ron's such a slob or I'd never have gotten enough practice to do this, Hermione said conversationally as she tied Harry's tie. I'm perfectly capable of tying my own tie, Hermione, Harry grumbled. I do it at school every day, you know that, you've seen me do it. Yes, but you seem to favor a Shelby knot while Daddy always seems to wear his tied in a Windsor, Hermione replied. Personally, I think the Shelby looks better, but we want to make a good impression on Daddy so we're going with the Windsor. Finished? Harry asked with a much put-upon sigh. Let me see your teeth, Hermione ordered. She inspected them for several seconds before giving her grudging approval. All right, let's go. She froze and stared out the window at something in the distance. I could have had a nice relaxing holiday at Hogwarts. Harry grumbled to himself. Voldemort doesn't usually try anything till the end of the year and I'd have had the whole castle to myself. Or I could have gone CK to Privy Drive and worked as a slave for the Dursleys, but no. I had to spend the winter with my friend. How could I be expected to know that she got even worse when she was at home? Most people relax on holidays. Did you say something, Harry? Hermione asked absently, looking back at her friend. Nothing particularly important. Why? Because my parents are here, Hermione squeaked. Hurry. She seized his wrist and darted out of the room. She finally came to a quivering halt in front of the main entrance. She didn't have long to wait before her parents came in. Mum, Hermione squealed. Daddy. She threw herself into their arms. I missed you too, Pumpkin, Phil murmured. James. Hermione disengaged herself from her parents and hugged her father's burly driver. I missed you too. Glad to know that someone does. The large man said with a pleased grin. Susanna. Hermione stepped around her mother to hug the maid. How have you been? Quite well, Ms. Hermione, the woman said fondly. Harry noted silently that neither the driver nor the maid had focused more than a fraction of their attention on Hermione and that they'd been careful to hug her back with only one arm. The right for the driver and the left for the maid. A fraction of the boy's mind wondered just what in the heck was going on. The rest of it noted that Hermione didn't seem to think that any of what was going on was unusual, so he decided to mind his own business until things made sense or he needed to act. Hermione stepped back and placed herself at Harry's side. Mum, Daddy, James, Susanna, this is Harry Potter. Pleasure to finally meet the boy that fills so much of our daughter's letters home, Anne said cheerfully. Glad you decided to join us for the winter holidays, Phil added. Thank you for inviting me. Harry said politely. Hermione seized him by the wrist again. Come on, Harry. You can sit next to me. Her parents shared a grin as they watched their daughter drag the boy out of the room. Do you remember her being that high-strung? Anne asked blandly. There's certainly nothing like that on my side of the family, he replied. I'd hope that having good stock on her sire's side would counter the inbreeding on the dams. Hold that thought till we have a chance to be alone, Anne said in a husky voice. Oh, and don't think I've forgotten your crazy uncle. Charlie. Great uncle, and by marriage. Later. Darling. Right, he agreed. Arm in arm they strolled after their daughter. Anne and Phil shared a smile when they entered the dining room and found the two children sitting side by side at the table. It's considered customary to sit across from each other, darling, Phil said with a smile. I always sit next to Harry like this, Hermione said with a slightly raised chin. It also put her in the perfect position to whisper advice to her friend and to make sure he used the proper fork. From you. An informal atmosphere is best when trying to get to know someone, Phil agreed. The food began arriving shortly after everyone took their seats. So tell me about this sport of yours, Harry, Phil began the small talk. It's played on brooms, sir. Harry began. You got to fly around and dodge bludgers, balls, while trying to toss a different kind of ball through a hoop. I'm a seeker, so my job is to try to catch a third kind of ball. Hard to find this third ball. It's about the size of one of your golf balls, Daddy, Hermione interjected. Harry has one of the best records as a seeker in school history, she boasted. Harry glanced at Hermione, not wanting to say anything that could remind his friend of one of the few subjects where she was not in the top of the class. It's very difficult, Hermione said quickly. Harry is the best at that in school. A smile appeared on Phil's face. Ever ridden a horse, Harry? No, sir, but I've ridden a hippogriff and a thestral. Hermione's parents glanced at their daughter. They're kinds of flying horses. Hermione explained. Phil gave Harry a speculative look. I wonder if, not at the table, Anne chastised. Hermione frowned. No, what at the table, Mum? Your father has become obsessed with polo lately. She sighed. I thought he'd gotten over it after you were born. I was focused on other things. He smiled at Hermione. Like my lovely new daughter. With you away at school most of the year. I need to do something with my time. Your father is getting old and the doctor says he needs to exercise, her mother translated. I can only play so much golf before it gets boring, Phil stated. Ignoring the woman's implication. Polo is the sport of kings and cavalrymen. I'm neither, but I enjoy it all the same. Anne grinned mischievously and leaned across the table to whisper to her daughter, personally. I think your father is trying to recapture the faded glory of his youth. Next thing you know, he's going to go out shopping for a young trophy wife. No danger of that, he quipped. I've already got one. He reached under the table and did something that caused Anne to give a surprised squeak. The two adults smiled at each other. Back to the lovely convey. Sation I was having before I was so rudely interrupted by my trophy wife. He turned back to Harry. What is your favorite subject? I was always partial to studying the tap myself, he added with a grin. Thinking of the long hours he'd spent drinking in Eden's pub. Defense is my favorite, Harry replied. Even if the teachers aren't always the best. Harry's the top student in our year, Hermione said proudly. He's so good at it that students in the upper years come to him for help. Even better than you, Pumpkin. Phil asked his daughter with a look of profound innocence on his face. In the practical portions, Hermione allowed. I have the edge on theory. Phil raised a speculative eyebrow after hearing the girl not just admit, but proudly state that someone else was better than her at something academic. And on everything else in the other classes, Harry added. She's the top student in our year. He smirked when he noticed his friend blush a deep red. Two could play at this game. The four of them continued their chat through the meal and beyond until Anne gave a deep yawn and began to visibly droop. Person, she said with a shrug. So we may as well cut things off there, Phil added. It was lovely chatting with you, Harry. He pretended not to notice when Hermione leaned over to whisper some instructions into the much put upon boy's ear. It was good talking with you too, sir, Harry said politely. I look forward to continuing our conversation tomorrow. Harry barely managed to suppress his reflexes when the butler suddenly appeared by his elbow. Would Sir like to have a guide back to his rooms? He asked formally. I'll take him, Hermione chirped. Really, Miss Hermione, it's rather far from your suite. I moved him to the free one in my hallway, Hermione explained. You did, the butler said sickly. This new development would make the job of keeping the two teens apart 100 times more difficult. Hermione giggled. I can't believe you were going to put Harry on the other side of the house when the room adjoining mine is still free. You're usually much more efficient than that. Yes, well, we thought you might like to save that for your other friend. The butler offered. The girl, since the staff viewed Hermione's other, yet to arrive guest with much less suspicion and trepidation than the one already present. Luna can stay with me in my rooms when she comes here, Hermione said with an unconcerned wave. I'm used to having roommates, more used to it than I am having a whole suite to myself because of Hogwarts. As you say, Ms. Hermione. The butler agreed sourly. He looked down at the boy and waited a few moments until the girl he thought of as the daughter he never had turned her attention away for a moment. Quote, I shall have one of the staff waiting in the hall in case you need anything, he said calmly. Just open the door and they'll see you. Thank all that was holy for the fact that the two suites weren't connected, he thought to himself. Okay, Harry agreed. But I don't want to be a bother. It's no bother, the butler said firmly, searching the boy's face for any sign of disappointment. I wouldn't want you to want for anything. Just remember, there will be someone outside your door all night. Thanks, then. Harry was sure that he was missing something. I appreciate all the trouble you're going to for me. Phil grinned as he watched the butler's defense of his daughter's virtue before the oblivious girl dragged her equally oblivious potential suitor off to their wing of the house. It was so wonderful to see things from the outside for once. He snapped himself back to reality when his wife mumbled something to him. I'm sorry, dear, Phil said softly, but I didn't quite catch that. I'm going to bed now that I no longer have to play hostess, she repeated. I'll join you shortly then, he replied. I need to have a speak Thomas for a moment first. Hurry, she said in a husky voice. I've got something I'd like to discuss with you before I drift off, you arrogant twit. I'll be there as soon as I can, he promised. Phil spent a few moments admiring the sight of his wife leaving the room before returning to the task at hand. He found her driver waiting patiently outside the dining room with a massive sandwich in one hand and a mug of ale in the other. Thank you for waiting, Thomas, Phil said politely. Now, if you would be good enough to give me your first impressions of our guest. Seems like a good kid, the driver said after a moment of thought. Seems a bit put out by the way Ms. Hermione likes to hover over him. Not sure that's the way she normally acts when they're at school together. He paused for a moment. Also seems to be a bit shocked by how large the house is. Don't believe he had any clue that Ms. Hermione came from money. I see. Anything else you'd like to add? Mr. Harry noticed my baby Fairburn right off, the driver reported. Quote, seemed to relax a touch when he noticed it was a knife. Was all set to do violence before that. Very observant lad, always has an eye on everyone. Probably thought it was a wand, Hermione's father said thoughtfully. Did he also notice your pistol? I don't believe so. The driver scratched his chin for a moment. Well, might have noticed that I had something hidden, but I don't believe he realized what it was or realized that it represented any sort of potential threat to him or Ms. Hermione. Thank you, Thomas, that will be all for the night. Yes, sir. Barking mad, Luna adjusted the light so that it bore down on her unfortunate prisoner. With a look of barely repressed fury on her face, she stalked closer and leaned across the table to let her target experience the full weight of her glare. Confess, she said sharply. We know everything you know and it'll only go harder on you if you don't talk. Luna, calm down. Can't you see you're scaring our guest, her father? Chided as he put a glass of water on the table. Have something to drink, he addressed the prisoner. I'm sorry about my daughter's behavior, but she's crazy. You really should talk, he confided. I don't know what she's liable to do if she gets all worked up. That's it, Luna shouted. I've had it. She picked up a chair and made to brain their prisoner with it. You mustn't, her father said in alarm. He rushed across the room and attempted to wrestle the chair away from his daughter. I don't know how long I can hold her off, he said desperately. Say something, anything, so I can calm her down. Croak, the frog offered nervously. Hermione skipped happily down to breakfast the next morning and took her seat at the table across from her parents, who'd apparently decided to continue sitting side by side. Where's Harry? Anne asked. I thought it best to let him sleep in. Hermione shot a grateful look to the maid as her breakfast was put on the table. How come he gets to sleep in? Philip grumbled to his wife. He's on holiday and not married to me, Anne replied cheerfully. Aside from that, no one made you get up. What was it you did this morning then? I just provided a bit of encouragement, Anne said innocently. She turned to her daughter. Do you have any plans for today, darling? Hermione's eyes widened as a thought occurred to her. Just one, Mum. She turned to her father, doing her best to look both cute and innocent. Yes, he prompted wearily. Years of parenthood making him all but immune to the girl's attempts to manipulate him in that fashion. Daddy, Hermione began. She twirled her hair around her fingers and batted her eyes as cutely as she could manage. Yes, what is it, darling? He said in a tone that conveyed his real meaning. What in God's name do you want? Is it all right if I store Harry's motorbikes with your cars? She asked sweetly. He doesn't have any place to put them at the moment and it would be a shame if they were damaged due to improper storage. Of course it is, darling. He grinned. He hadn't known the boy was a petrolhead. He'd have to remember to have a look to see if the boy had anything interesting. Likely not, but who knew? He might have an old Commando or one of the other classic British bikes. May I also use your shop to perform maintenance on them? Hermione asked sweetly. And to assemble the ones we haven't got to yet. Of course you may, darling. He was really going to have a word with his daughter's friend. Hopefully the boy would be willing to share his secrets. The man regarded his wife out of the corner of his eye, wondering if he could use the boy's methods to get his wife to perform maintenance on his collection. Was that all, darling? Anne asked with a smirk to inform her husband that she'd caught his stray thought. I'd also like to spend some time with you, Mum, Hermione added with a blush. There are some things I'd like to ask you. Of course, darling, Anne agreed. I wasn't planning on going out today, so anytime that's convenient for you. Thank you, Mum. Later will be convenient for me as well. She turned back to her father. What's your first impression of Harry, Daddy? Seems like a well-brought-up young man, he said smoothly, mindful of Tep would cause his daughter to further torment the poor boy. Do you think he'd like to learn polo? She asked shyly. I'll be sure to ask him later, her father promised. Thank you, Daddy. She smiled, pleased that her father seemed to approve of her best friend and confident that it was at least par. Due to the work she'd done to get him ready. Looked like the highly detailed plan she'd made had been well worth the time it had taken her think it up and execute it. She rewarded herself with an extra rasher of bacon as she enjoyed the warm glow of success and a job well done. 16 hours, she mumbled. 16 hours. And he refuses to crack no matter what we throw at him. We'll have everything when he does, her father said confidently. The lower levels don't get the kind of training needed to withstand an interrogation like that. What if? Luna trailed off. What is it? What if it really is just a frog? Luna said unsurely. What if he hasn't cracked because there's nothing to crack and he's exactly what he appears to be? Then God help us all. Because if they're good enough to disguise a frog as one of their best agents disguised as a frog, then they can disguise anything as anything and we can't trust anything. Not even each other. He shot a suspicio's look at his daughter only to receive a matching look of suspicion in return. Quick, tell me something only you would know. Nice try, she growled. That's exactly the sort of thing a spy would ask. Don't think I'm not on to you. You're right, he admitted, turning his suspicious glare from her to the nearest mirror. And to think, I almost had myself fooled. Tell me something only I would. No to prove you are who you say you are, Luna demanded in a menacing growl. If it's something only you would know then of course I wouldn't know it because if I did then it wouldn't be something only you could. No, he said, still glaring suspiciously at himself in the mirror. Unless you'd been spying on me and I just thought it was something only I would know, Luna pointed out reasonably. Which would have outed me as a spy if I answered correctly, he said in realization. Brilliant, as always. Thank you, Father. Luna's look of suspicion deepened considerably. If that is indeed your real name. But I've just proved I wasn't a spy because I spy would have known the answer, so that must mean. His suspicious glare returned to his daughter. Clever, very clever. And to think you almost had me fooled. Au contrary, it was I that almost had myself fooled, but in the end, only a fool can fool a fool, so the real fool is the fool which is just dirty pool, so logically the fool in need is a fool indeed. Luna declared. The fooled fool is the fool which fooled the fool, so we can therefore deduce that the fool is the spy, for who but a spy would seek to fool, and who be you? A fool would fool a fool, and so the fool is none other than. Phil was the only person still at the table when Harry made his way downstairs that morning, his wife and daughter having long since deserted him in favor of things he was better off knowing nothing about. Harry, a word. Phil motioned for the boy to join him. What is it, sir? Harry asked. How did you get my daughter to assemble and maintain your motorbike collection? Philip asked intently, hoping that he could use the same method to convince his wife to do the same. His daughter had never shown the slightest interest in mechanical things before, which offered a shred of hope that such a thing might be possible. Hermione and Luna thought that I might wish to have them, Harry explained. They belong to my godfather, Harry added. Though with the way they play with them it's more along the lines of keeping their toys cleaned and polished for when they want to try out a new enchantment, most of which seem to explode. Thank you, Harry. No problem, sir. Harry looked around. Is Hermione up yet? Up and eaten. She's with her mother right now, they're having a mysterious conversation about feminine mysteries. He waved to the staff to prepare the boys' breakfast. You may not see her for a few hours. Okay. Harry agreed. A sudden thought occurred to him. Sir. What is it, Harry? Phil replied. I was just wondering. Harry trailed off. Yes. He prompted. Why did you forbid Hermione to use magic to fix her teeth? She told you that. He sighed. This again. Yes, sir. We didn't forbid her. We told her that we wanted to research magical healing before we made a decision. You may not have noticed, but my daughter tends to put a lot of faith in books. My wife and I would rather get a low okay at the effects of magical healing before we commit to anything involving our only child's health. Makes sense. Perfect sense, sir, Harry agreed. He made a mental note to check up on the man's worries, privately admitting that he had a point. It would be just like magicals to miss some horrific long-term side effects. Now that I've answered your question, do you mind if I ask one of my own? What would you like to know, sir? Tell me, Harry, what do you know about polo? It's got something to do with horses, Harry said hesitantly. Yes. And that's all, Harry confessed. How would you like to learn? Phil asked eagerly. Sure, Harry agreed. It would give him an excuse to get away from Hermione when she was in full study mode after all. Excellent, Phil cheered. Now, the first thing you need to know is. Phil spent an enjoyable morning teaching the attentive boy almost everything he'd need to know to get started on the polo field later. Well, he did until his daughter Ari vowed to assert her claim on his new polo partner. Come on, Harry, Hermione said, bursting with enthusiasm. We've still got a bunch more books to read, she announced as she dragged the boy out of the room and in the direction of the library. Anne strolled into her husband's office with a devilish grin on her face. You'll never guess what I just found out. The joys of being a productive member of society, he asked snidely. The fact that your deeds matter more than those of some long-dead ancestor. Hold that thought, she said quickly. We can get to the fun stuff later. That good, huh? Phil rubbed his hands together in anticipation. What is it? The staff has decided that they need to protect Hermione's virtue from Harry's despicable intentions, she giggled. Exactly how do THEY know that Harry had despicable intentions towards our daughter? Phil asked with an amused grin. He's a teenage boy and she is a teenage girl. Point, he agreed. A very good point in fact. As a rule, their intentions are usually somewhat less than pure at that age, aren't they? Like yours or any purer at your age, Anne interjected. On the other hand, he continued, ignoring his wife's slanderous accusation, I'm not sure that Hermione has realized that he is a boy or that romance exists as anything more than an abstract to be read about. She is a bit focused on her studies. Then there's the fact that they've been friends since their first year, Phil pointed out. She probably still sees him as a scruffy. Let's stop there, Anne suggested. We wouldn't want to get into the habit of calling him that. Would we? Phil grinned widely. Definitely not after the way Hermione reacted to my last offhanded comment, he agreed. Just the sort of thing I'd have expected to hear from a capitalist pig who made his living off the sweat of the masses, she sneered. I'll have a word with the staff later, he promised. The expression on his face turned sinister. Huh, as if a blue blood like you knows anything about the working class. The patriarch of the tiny Lovegood clan walked into the interrogation room and flopped down on the chair. With a sigh, the man favored he prisoner with a look that mixed sympathy and resigned exasperation, just as page 75 of the manual they'd dug up from the deepest part of the Lovegood library had advised. It was quite fortunate that they'd had an ancestor that had been employed, Foystone Police Department, and even more fortunate that he had written a manual containing everything he had learned during his years on the force. She's a good girl, he said softly. Just a bit high-strung. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a large plump cricket. I don't think she'd do anything to hurt you. Well, not unless she got disgruntled anyway. He absently popped the cricket into his mouth and began chewing. Then she's liable to anything. He pulled another cricket out of his pocket. The thing is, oh, how rude of me. Would you like one? Croak. The entirety of the frog's attention was focused on the struggling insect in the disturbed man's hand. Here you go then. He held out the cricket, allowing the amphibian to gobble it down. As I was saying, Father, Luna's voice carried into the room. Where's my dinner? You know how I get when I haven't had my dinner. In case you've forgotten, it's disgruntled. Disgruntled is how I get. You know what happens when I get disgruntled. There's no telling what I'll do. Things that I would never normally dream of doing because they're too horrible to contemplate, that's what. All I need now is a suitable target. You wouldn't happen to know where our prisoner is, would you? Because he'd make the sort of target that I would find suitable on which to vent my frustrations in my current state of disgruntlement. You'd better not be trying to hide him from me. Oh dear, he said in alarm. She's getting disgruntled. I only hope that I haven't left things too long. But if I have and she doesn't calm down soon. He shuddered in fear. Please, just tell me something, anything I can use to distract her. Croak. Hermione dragged her best friend into the library and loaded his arms with what she considered a minimum amount of books to have at hand for a bit of light reading. The table beside her favorite chair didn't so much as creak under the combine. The weight of the tomes having been specially constructed for the purpose after its predecessor had begun to show signs of wear. There we go. That should last us for a couple hours anyway, Hermione said in a tone of deep satisfaction. The librarian smiled as her young charge plopped into her favorite chair. I took the liberty of getting another chair for young Mr. Potter, Ms. Jane said loudly. Quote, that way you two won't be forced to use the same one like you were yesterday. We don't mind, Hermione said obliviously. But thank you for the thought, Ms. Jane. Harry gave a helpless shrug in reply. Why to the look of deep suspicion and disapproval on the woman's face at their seating arrangement? Hermione scooted to one side of the chair to make room and settled her legs on his lap after he sat down. It didn't take long before Harry had immersed himself in a rather fascinating book on the defensive use of common household charms. He was ashamed to admit that he'd never considered how lethal a charm to boil water could be if properly targeted. Voldemort and his merry band of catamites and killers were going to be in for a surprise the next time he had the misfortune of running into them. Sorry to disturb the two of you, Phil said, causing the two teens to jump at the sudden interruption. But I was wondering if I couldn't have a bit of time with my daughter. What is it, Daddy? Hermione asked. I've got a surprise for you, Phil said mysteriously. Harry. Yes, sir. I was planning on going to the stables after lunch and I was wondering if you'd like to accompany me. I'd be delighted to, sir, Harry agreed. Excellent. He smiled. And please, do call me Phil. He placed a fatherly arm around his daughter's shoulders and gently led her out of the room. Hermione was able to contain her curiosity for nearly 3 minutes as her father led her towards the garage. What's the surprise? Daddy, you'll find out when we get to the garage, darling, he replied. Is it magical? Hermione asked. Some, myself included, would say that it is. It is not, however, your sort of magic if that's what you're asking, he replied. Hermione chewed her lip. Is it bigger than a bread box? It is, he agreed. Smaller than a shipping container and it comes in several colors. Phil led his daughter into the garage and came to a stop in front of a large crate. Here it is. He leafed the lid to allow Hermione a look at the contents. What's this, Daddy? Hermione asked, fascinated by the mechanical mystery she'd been presented with. It's a kit car, darling, her father replied. We found several of these unfinished kits in one of the new properties. He decided not to mention the fact that their existence was the primary reason he'd closed the deal. What's this one? It's a sports car, he replied. A Lotus 7 to be precise. The car in the opening of The Prisoner. He added, which did nothing to wipe the look of incomprehension on her face. Kids, no appreciation for the classics. I thought you might like to put it together. I'm not sure I can without Luna, Hermione admitted. She is still coming here, isn't she? He said with a smile. I thought you girls like something to do while you're here and I thought you might wish to receive your first automobile. I did when I was about your age and thought it might be nice to continue the tradition. His smile deepened. If you find that you enjoy it then it would be my pleasure to find a shared hobby. You like assembling cars? Hermione asked in shock. I prefer collecting them, he admitted, but to spend time with my daughter I'm quite willing to get my hands dirty. Hermione rummaged around the container for a few minutes until she found what she was looking for, holding up the manual with a look of triumph. She began thumbing through it, detached from the world. Luna slowly walked into the room and made a deliberate show of locking the door behind her. Page 67 of the manual had contained several ideas on how to put the prisoner in the proper state of mind for what was on page 46. Father is such a sweet man, Luna purred. So innocent, but not the two of us. She shot the frog a jaded look. We know how the world works, we know how ugly it can be, and that's why you're going to tell me everything I want to know. Because we're not so different, you and I. You know exactly what you would do to me if I were on the other side of that chair and it scares the heck out of you, doesn't it? Because you know that I'm willing to go just as far as you are to get the information I need and you're one of the few individuals around unfortunate enough to know exactly what that statement means and how terrifying it is. Croak. I'm tired of playing around, Luna growled. Her left hand focused the light on the frog. Either you tell me what I want to know or I'll bury you. You got me. Luna screamed. I will bury you. She pulled a phone book out of her pocket and let it drop onto the table in front of her prisoner. It landed with a satisfying thump. "I think you know what I need that for and just how unpleasant things are about to be for you," she said menacingly. She hoped he did anyway, as she wasn't too sure of what use it was supposed to have in an interrogation. Maybe she was supposed to read it to him or something. Pity her ancestor hadn't been more led with some of the more confusing bits. "Where should we start?" She giggled shrilly. "Or should I just—" Her rant cut off when someone knocked on the door, which was odd as her father was supposed to wait for his cue before barging in to save the prisoner. She carefully unlocked the door and peered out. "We're gonna have to cut him loose," her father said unhappily. "Why?" Luna asked with a pout. "The Sedition Act lets us hold him for up to 2 weeks without being charged. His solicitor's here with a writ ordering us to release him," her father explained. Luna opened the door wider, revealing another confused frog. This one in a tiny business suit with a tiny robe over them and a tiny wig on his tiny head. "How do you know he's a lawyer?" she asked curiously. "He's wearing a business suit, a set of robes, and aimed." It had taken hours to get it to fit right on the tiny amphibian. "I realized he might be a solicitor after I got the suit onto him. I was sure of it after I got the wig on." "Isn't there anything we can do?" Luna pled. "Not unless you manage to get him to talk," her father sighed. Woof! Their prisoner barked, the frog's fragile sanity having been shattered by the latest display of insanity. "Woof woof. Ribbit," the frog's lawyer inquired. "Yeah," Luna agreed. "Get him outta here." Sometimes it wasn't easy to be a reporter. Sometimes she wondered if she wouldn't be better just to hang up the notepad and retire. But she knew she couldn't do it, not when the public was counting on her to bring them the truth. "Don't be like that, Crabapple," her father consoled. "It's time for you to pack up to go to your friend's house anyway." Like Quidditch, polo wasn't a sport that Hermione had any interest in. Like Quidditch, polo seemed to be a way for idiots to harm themselves with a thin veneer of sport over it to make it appear respectable. Also, like Quidditch, there was no power on earth that would stop her from going anyway to show support for her best friend. Anne gasped as her houseguest got thrown from his horse and landed on the turf with a sickening thud. "Tough fellow, isn't he?" she commented calmly after the boy got up immediately and remounted his horse. "Getting up like that, Hermione didn't drag her eyes off the game. "That fall was nothing. You should see some of the situations he gets himself in during a Quidditch game. Bad. Sometimes I think they should ban the bloody sport," Hermione admitted harshly. "It's bloody awful. Hardly a game goes by that doesn't end with Harry in the hospital wing." Harry was in his element, in the thick of it all. He'd jumped at the chance to experience a friendly game at the Granger's Club, trusting that his previous riding experience would see him through. Probably a mistake, he admitted to himself as he remounted. A flash of white caught his eye and Harry let his instincts take over, choking up on the polo mallet and slid down till his head was only inches away from the ground. A firm whack propelled the small wooden ball through the goal posts, scoring the last point of the game. "Good show, lad," one of his teammates called out. "But in the future, I would advise you not to show off so much." "What do you mean?" Harry squinted in the older man's general direction. "The business at the end," he clarified. "Where you did that fancy riding." "Oh, that. I wasn't trying to show off," Harry replied. "Broke my glasses when I got thrown and I couldn't see the ball well enough to hit it without getting close." "Ah, forgive me then." He shot the boy a measured look. Quote, "Planning to work on your game during your stay with the Grangers?" "Time permitting," Harry agreed cheerfully. Hermione sighed in frustration when it became apparent to her that Harry had no intention of leaving the field despite his inability to see and potential injuries. "He's going to play without his glasses," Anne exclaimed in surprise. "He'd try to keep going if he broke both his arms. Harry doesn't know how to quit," Hermione said with a frown. "That dummy. Guess a trip to the optometrist is in order after this then," Anne commented. She gave a nod to her driver, trusting that the burly man would arrange it. After all, it's not like you can use magic to fix them. "Not during holidays anyway," Hermione mumbled in discontent. "How much longer is this game going to be?" "Should be finishing up any time now," her mother replied. She smiled as the players dismounted. "A quick shower and we'll be ready to go." Did Harry's team win? Hermione asked reluctantly, a bit ashamed to admit that she hadn't been keeping score. Don't believe they did, Anne replied. Why? Just wondering, Hermione said. Hermione was waiting when Harry and her father emerged from the locker room minutes later and immediately invaded the boy's personal space to give him a pat down to assure herself that he hadn't gotten any injuries. Stand still, she ordered, getting annoyed at the way boy was trying to pull back and slapping his hands out of the way to make sure he wasn't hiding any sore areas. It doesn't look like you broke anything, she said. The girl leaned forward to peer at his eyes. No sign of a concussion either. Let me see your teeth, she demanded. I hope we didn't make you wait long, darling, Phil said with a smile, but we thought it prudent to have the team Doctor give Harry a once-over to make sure he didn't have any injuries before we came out. You didn't, Daddy. Good thinking, Hermione replied as she finished her inspection. Come on, Mum's waiting in the car. I didn't know we were in a hurry, Phil said thoughtfully. We need to get Harry some new glasses, Hermione said firmly. I'm fine, Harry pitched in. He held up a pair of taped frames. The tape will hold for now and we can fix them when we get back to school. Hermione frowned. You listen to me, Harry Potter. You are going to get a new pair of glasses right now and you're going to like it. It's long past time you got a new pair of frames, and she was sick of the other girls saying bad things about them and how they made him look. Needless to say, she kept that last part to herself. It's not that I have a problem with getting new glasses, Hermione, Harry said reluctantly. It's just, well. Just what? I don't really have much money on me, Harry protested. Don't worry about it, Phil said cheerfully. You're our guest after all. Still, Luna looked over the disorganized pile of junk on her bed with a sense of pure satisfaction. Sometimes it was best to get everything together before you packed it to make sure you didn't leave anything behind by mistake. Father, she called out. Where are the spare tools for the printing press? In the ice box, he called back. And my portable offset press? It's under your bed, he replied. So is your typewriter. Thank you, Father. It's what fathers are for, Ragweed. What's wrong, Harry? She finally asked, concern coloring her tone. I can see the leaves, Harry whispered in an awe-filled voice. What, on that tree? He pointed down the motorway. I can see the leaves from here. So, Hermione asked with a confused frown. I've never been able to see that well before, Harry explained. I always thought everyone was the same way and that it was impossible to see things far away with that much detail. Oh. A thought occurred. How do you see the snitch then? I always look for the sparkle, he replied absently. A grin formed on his face. Draco is in for a big surprise in our next game. Oh. Getting those glasses was a good thing then. A great thing, Harry agreed. Ms. Jane the librarian was waiting for them at the front door with a wide smile on her face when they finally made it home. Thought you'd want to know that a new box of books arrived earlier today, Hermione's old governess reported. It's in the blue room waiting for you. Thank you, Ms. Jane, Hermione said politely. Unable to restrain herself any longer, the girl darted down the hall and towards her precious treasures intent on spending the hours until dinner in uninterrupted bliss. She was carefully giving the third book a quick flip through when her best friend slipped into the room with an odd expression on his face. Harry carefully locked the door and, after a few seconds of consideration, calmly propped a chair under the knob. Long experience with the Dursleys had taught him that fights may start with the adults but would quickly spread to him. What are you doing? Hermione asked without looking up from her book. Your parents are having a row, Harry replied. He carefully considered what else to add to his barricade. Thought it might be a good idea to get out of sight. Something he thought prudent even if they were nothing like the Dursleys, never hurt to be careful. Hermione looked up from her book. Your dad said your mum's class was a feckless drain on sock that bad breeding would tell, Harry replied. Oh, Hermione stifled a giggle. They're not fighting. Then what are they doing? Harry asked with a raised eyebrow, interested to learn how things were in normal families. The Dursleys being anything but despite their attempts to be so. Be hard to find a bigger lot of freaks, he thought to himself. Mum and Dad met when they were in university when they took the same politics class. Hermione suppressed a smile. So their politics were diametrically opposed and they spent half the class arguing with each other. The professor got tired of having to listen to it, so he made them work on a project together. They've been together ever since. Sounds like you and Ron, Harry joked, having heard more than one of his housemates speculate on the so-called true nature of his two friends' relationship. Mum and Dad disagreed on politics, Hermione said with a frown, more than a bit sick at the thought of dating Ron. Time to eat, Weasley. Ron and I disagree on everything, including his complete lack of manners. Oh, besides, Daddy later told me that he didn't believe most of the things he used to spout off in class. Just did it to make Mum and he other lefties angry, since he didn't believe in any of what they spouted off, and Mum was fun to wind up and really cute when she was angry, so he spent most of his time trying to make her angry. Mum knows what he's doing now, so she doesn't get angry anymore, but Daddy says she still gets cuter. Harry's eyes crossed. Hermione giggled. There's no heat in it, it's just a game they play. Understand? Yeah, Harry agreed. I guess. Quote, come over here and sit next to me, Hermione demanded. I've got some new defense books here that you might want to look at. They were buried somewhere under the engineering books. Harry was lucky to have a friend like her that was thoughtful enough to add reading material that he'd be interested in to her order. Hermione thought smugly. It was consideration like that had convinced her to reward herself with another dozen books for Luna and herself. Anne walked into her husband's office with a look of profound smugness on her face. Looked as if her little girl had realized her friend was a boy after all, or vice versa. She wasn't picky. You'll never guess what I heard from one of the maids. Her husband looked up from his papers to focus his attention on her. What is it? Harry took advantage of our distraction earlier today to sneak into our daughter's room and barricade the door. Phil sighed. He did, but not for the reason you're thinking. Why then? She demanded, a bit put out that things weren't as juicy as she'd been led to believe they were. So he thought we were having an actual disagreement, that it might get violent, and that Hermione's safety might be threatened, and so decided that it would be prudent to get between us and Hermione, Phil said bluntly. Just in case things got out of hand. In case of, she drooped. Well, it just goes to show what a responsible young man he is, she said in approval. I'm still trying to figure out why Hermione didn't talk to us about Harry's situation, Phil continued. I wouldn't have even guessed it. One of the footmen had to tell me. It was one of the advantages of hiring staff away from his little girl's godfather. They were unusually good at ferreting out the odd secret. A skill that had come in handy on numerous previous occasions. What are you going to do about it? Anne asked softly, knowing her husband well enough to know that he wasn't going to leave things as they were. Well, I had thought to buy the company the man works for and then fire him. He smiled coldly. Then I would continue to do everything in my power to keep out of work if it meant buying every company in England, with the end result being the bastard starving to death in a ditch somewhere without so much as a pence to his name. How about we give a couple of the staff a few days off, with a strong suggestion that they spend their time at Dursley's residence? I'm sure Susanna would be delighted to do so, Anne asked. A visit Vernon might even serve. Even if his ability to eat solid foods did not. We can do your way after that. We could do that, he allowed. Or I suppose that I could call my brother-in-law and ask him for a favor. Well, he does have a few friends in the House of Lords, but other than that, I'm not sure what he can do. Bloody useless fop, she finished fondly. She loved her brother dearly, but the man had no sense at all. Seemingly content to spend his days in idleness and to be even more useless than their father had been when the had still been active. Other side, Phil laughed. The judge. I see. Anne smiled wickedly. I knew there was a reason I married you. Yep, he agreed. For the obscenely massive piles of money you gained access to after we exchanged our vows. Oh, I thought it was so I could pursue my own interests, knowing that you had absolutely no desire for women, she said as she slid into his lap. Least that's what your sister-in-law said the night before the wedding. What? He asked dully. She was so angry that I was keeping you from being yourself. Anne giggled musically. She said that she only wanted you to be happy and that I was denying you that chance by selfishly trapping you in what would undoubtedly be a loveless marriage. More likely she was angry that I would retain control over the family money and my heirs after me, he replied. Gold-digging witch. Diver. Chingher was the one intelligent thing your brother ever did, Anne said sympathetically. Not that he isn't a perfectly lovely man, it's just. He's a bit too much like your brother. Interested in wine, women, and more wine. Well, publicly anyway. He absolutely hated keeping things from his wife, but there were some things best kept as quiet as possible. Exactly, she agreed. The older one anyway, Jack is a bit better, just lazy. He's still working as a repairman. Yes, she gave a heavy and long-suffering sigh. He has so much potential too, if only he'd apply himself to something. As the biggest scandal that had rocked their family in centuries, someone of the blood doing something so hopelessly common. The only thing that barely excused it, so far as the less pleasant members of her family were concerned, was the fact that he'd been born on the wrong side of the sheets. Didn't he know that he was supposed to go into exile and live on his remittance rather than doing something so common? Her stepmother had whispered that it was proof that even the most noble of blood wasn't always able to overcome the common sort every chance she got. The day she'd seen the back of the T-woman for the last time was one of her fonder memories. Omake below. Omake by Joey Zoot. You may ask her 3 questions, Phil allowed. Based on my kids, what if, s. The 3-question rule and why guard as the librarian, Hermione at 2.5. Mummy, what's that? That is a caterpillar. Hermione. What does it do? It becomes a butterfly. How? It will spin a cocoon around itself and become a butterfly inside. How does it do that? Hermione. You know the rule. Yes, Mummy. 3 questions only. Miss Jane. Come along. Hermione, your mummy has to go to work now. Maybe we can find a book about caterpillars. Later. Miss Jane. This book only has pictures. I want to know more. First. Hermione. It's, I want to know. Not, I want to know. Perhaps we can find a book in the library about caterpillars. Still later. Sir, I'm having a little problem. Hermione's dad. Oh, what seems to be the problem? Well, sir, Hermione is not satisfied with the books on biology in the library regarding caterpillars and butterflies. I have a cousin who runs a bookshop. I was wondering if I could order some more books on the subject. Wonderful idea. Why don't you take responsibility for keeping the library up so Hermione is not disappointed again? And so it begins. Omake by Dogbert Carroll. Harry and Hermione walked up to the Lovegoods chess piece cheer. Harry and Hermione had both had the best tea they'd ever had in their lives, and the only thing missing was Luna. They knocked at the door and were shocked to see Luna appear with bags under her eyes and looking like she hadn't slept in days. Luna, are you okay? They both burst out. I don't know, Luna admitted. Trying to break someone has left me almost as broken as I wanted them to be, but if we don't get the information. Luna burst out in tears and the two quickly embraced her and carried her to the sofa they spied from the entryway. The agitated man sat next to his daughter and rubbed her back until her sobbing stilled as they both fell asleep. Harry and Hermione quickly entered the door they'd seen Luna's father enter the room from and followed the stairs down to an interrogation room. Spotting the toad sitting on a table under a spotlight, their eyes hardened. They both remembered a certain rat and were determined to not let that situation be repeated. I'll need a car battery and some small clamps, Hermione said firmly. I think I recognize that species. But we'll save the pelicans for last, just in case nothing else works. Omake by Meteoric Shipyards. Excellent. Loved the Lovegood scenes. Here's an omake. The room was quiet and dark. Will Frog sat in the corner and thought. He had already checked the room out thoroughly and knew that there was no escape. The Lovegoods might be crazy, but they were also geniuses. The green amphibian just hoped that the training he had received would be enough. He almost gave the game away when he offered him that Junebug. He always had a weakness for Junebug. As long as he kept his mouth closed. If the Snurkax even thought he talked, his rear appendages would end up an entree in a posh London restaurant. He shuddered, and calmed himself for the next round of interrogation. The bimetallic question. Phil was forcibly awakened early by a loud pounding on the door to his bedchambers. Holidays were supposed to be a time for relaxing. A time when you could laze around in bed until noon, he lamented to himself. A pity his offspring didn't understand that. Go see what Hermione wants, his wife muttered. How do you know it's Hermione? He rejoined. Who else could it be? Harry wouldn't think to bother us and the staff would have come in if they thought it was important enough to disturb us, she replied. That does not explain why should I be the one to go see what she wants. He pointed out calmly as the pounding continued and intensified, the spaces between the knocks getting shorter and shorter as their daughter's patience grew thinner and thinner. Because I'm asleep and you're much too considerate to disturb me, she said reasonably. Snore, snore, she added unconvincingly. I blame this on your father. For spoiling you so much when you were a child, he said conversationally as he shrugged into his bathrobe. I shall have to remember to have words with him at our next meeting. Remember to mention the fact that he could have shipped me off to one of those dreadful boarding schools like my stepmother suggested rather than hiring private tutors, she suggested with a yawn. It was always a sore point with her that I was around to make it difficult to siphon off more than she did. Phil yawned as he walked across the room and opened the door, the knocks sounding like machine gun fire at that point. What is it, darling? We need to get Luna today, Hermione explained cheerfully, looking as if she had not in fact spent the previous few minutes disturbing the peace by pounding on her parents' bedroom door. Mum said she wanted to wake up early so we could have breakfast together in London. Funny how she made it sound like she was being helpful. I think she meant early, not still dark outside, Phil said thoughtfully. The sun's been out for almost 6 minutes, Daddy, Hermione giggled. I didn't start knocking till it was out, you know. I made sure to check. Of course it has, 6 whole minutes, silly me. He sighed. It's for you, dear. I heard, Anne called back. She made eye contact with her daughter. Wait downstairs, darling. I'll be with you shortly. Okay, Mum, Hermione agreed. I can't wait for you to meet Luna, she added before happily skipping down the stairs. Our daughter is skipping, Phil reported, trying and failing to remember the last time he'd seen his baby girl do that. It's nice to see her so excited about something, Anne replied. Also good to confirm that she's got at least one close female friend. Just be sure not to say that the girl is scruffy, he said seriously. You know how that turned out the last time. How could I forget? She laughed. How do I look? She twirled around. Ravishing. Mind doing me a favor? Knowing you. Quite possibly. What do you want? Could you take Harry to the bank and make a quick check of his accounts? Hermione was worried about them. I am going to the club today and after that, I'm going to Gringotts Bank to conduct some business, he stated. I have been meaning to open an account for Hermione so she has a bit of pocket money for while she's away at school. If Harry wishes to come along with me, I would be happy to have the company. And also happy to give a bit of unsolicited advice, Anne added. Please. Of course. Thank you, dear. Not at all. Off with you. Wouldn't want to keep our daughter waiting. No telling what sort of ideas she'll get or what mischief they'll lead her into, she agreed. I shall have to remember to make an itemized list of NS to blame your side of the family for each and every one of them. Phil took his time getting showered and dressed and was more than a bit surprised to find his house guest waiting for him in the sitting room when he finally emerged. Hermione wake you up too? He asked sympathetically. No, sir. I was already up. Wake up early then. Haven't managed to break the habit yet, Harry admitted. He had only been fear of getting lost in the giant house that had kept him in his room so long the first day. You'll get the hang of it someday, I'm sure. Phil grinned. I'm going to London today, would you care to accompany me? I don't want to be a bother, Harry said quickly. You won't be, Phil promised. I'd consider it a favor if you did accompany me since I always have a bloody time of finding the entrance to Diagon Alley if Hermione isn't along. You're going to Diagon Alley? Harry asked in surprise. To the bank, yes. I have some business to do there. I also wouldn't mind a chance to poke around the shops without Hermione dragging me towards the bookstore either. All right, Harry agreed. I'd be happy to come, sir. Thank you. Excellent. Glad to have you with me. Just please, remember it's Phil, not sir. Okay, Phil. I'll try to remember. Good. Have you eaten yet, Harry? Not yet. We'll eat at the club then. Phil decided. Come along, Harry. The car should be waiting for us out front. Anne paid the restaurant staff no notice as they bustled around the table. She chose instead to focus on her daughter, who promised to be a great source of entertainment if our performance this morning was any sort of indicator of future behavior. Where and when are we supposed to meet your friend, darling? The woman asked. Luna said she'd meet us at King's Cross Station around 10, Hermione replied, oblivious to the fact that a portion of the security team had detached itself from the main group to make their preparations. Does she have any special needs we need to be aware of? Anne continued. Dietary requirements, that sort of thing. No, Mum. She's just a little strange, Hermione said, sipping her tea. In what way? She likes to believe in animals that don't exist, Hermione explained. I think her dorm mates like to pick on her because of it. I see. But she's a very nice girl, Hermione hastened to add. And she's very smart. I'm glad you've got at least one female friend, Anne said with a soft smile, repeating her earlier words to her husband. Would Harry getting jealous if all you had was boys around, would we? Mum. Anne giggled at the expression on her daughter's face. The car pulled up to the curb and Phil Granger's imposing driver stepped out, eyes scanning for threats, and then glanced at the team leads in the lead car and the chase car for their nods. Assured that there were no immediate dangers, the man stepped around the car, opened the rear passenger door, and stepped aside to allow his patron to step out of the vehicle. Come along, Harry, Phil said as they exited the car. Where are we going, sir? Harry asked politely. Hermione's father made a face. I believe I told you to call me Phil. Sorry. It's a hard habit to break. Don't worry about it. Phil waved his hand at an impressive stone building. We're going to my club for a bit to meet with someone. The Diogenes Club. Harry read the plaque on side of the building. Be sure not to speak with or look at anyone, Phil said firmly. Not until I say it's all right to anyway. Okay, Harry agreed. Club rules, Phil explained. Keeps the atmosphere relaxed. Harry followed the man up the steps and to the front door, which was opened by a man in livery just as they arrived. New member, sir, the doorman asked with a laugh. I'm thinking of sponsoring him in a few years. Phil agreed. The doorman's smile vanished and he took a moment to examine Harry. I look forward to hearing your reasons, sir. I look forward to giving them, he returned. He stepped into the building. This way, Harry. Harry kept his mouth firmly closed even as his eyes widened in astonishment at the rich furnishings and ornate decorations. After going through a maze of halls, up a flight of stairs and down several more until they finally came to a stop in front of a thick oak door. You can talk now, Harry, Phil told the boy. Follow me. Harry followed Hermione's father through the doorway and into a small room, bare save for a woman sitting behind a desk next to another large door. Good afternoon, sir. The woman's right hand disappeared below the desk. What can I do for you today? Is M in? Phil asked. Who may I say is asking for him, sir? The woman ignored the question. Harry stepped to one side and edged a hand towards his wand due to the slight tightening in the woman's posture, which indicated that trouble is on the way. Philip Granger. That's Philip with a P, not an F. Yes, sir. The woman relaxed and her right hand reappeared. I apologize for not recognizing you. Sir, no apology is ever necessary for doing one's duty, Phil said calmly. Well, may I enter or is he busy? Go right in, sir. Phil crossed the room and threw open the door, as Harry followed. He noticed a name on the door, the letters faded with time. Mycroft Holmes, he read silently. Why in the devil did that name sound so familiar? The office they went into was much richer than the first one. Thick Persian carpets covered the floor and a man that Harry faintly recognized sat behind the desk. Got a new pair of glasses, did you? The man asked with an easy grin. Look forward to seeing how it affects your game. Still need to practice before I can take advantage of my better sight, sir, Harry replied cheerfully, finally placing the man as one of his teammates in the polo game.